actually develops that technology that helps self-driving cars, and especially when they're turning and parking, and it helps the autonomy to really provide that reliable situational awareness. So it's a very important thing. They work with Mercedes, Volvo, and all those big brands. So they're doing well.
All right. Something good there in that list. All right, Denisa, thanks a lot. Denisa Sakova, a Bloomberg cross-asset reporter, joining us. And as Paul has been teasing, Poonam Goyal, senior U.S. e-commerce and retail analyst, will be joining us to recap those Nike earnings. Plus, Hassam Naji is CEO of Marcus & Millichap to discuss the latest in commercial real estate. We were at the bottom, then we weren't, then where are we now? I guess that's really the question as we hit on this Friday. It's pretty ugly out there for some of these stocks. Also, the S&P is still down by about 0.9%. Just tech can't seem to get a bid either, off by about 0.8%. I know, it's triple witching. It's a thing right around the close and the open. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and we're being brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses, Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half. if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. Let's see if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Right now, all 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500 are lower. NVIDIA, among the most actively traded right now, shares of NVIDIA, they are down 1.7%. NVIDIA stock down almost 14% year to date. The stock's 50-day moving average fell below its 200-day moving average, forming a bearish death cross pattern, which occurred in April of 2022, the last time. That was followed by a 30% decline in the shares over the next 2 months. Nike, also among the most actively traded, the company signaling further declines in revenue and profitability. They're also trying to clear out old inventory through heavy discounting. Right now, shares of Nike, they are down 7%. And after its earnings, FedEx shares again down 10.5%. Now, overall, the S&P 500 extends its declines down 41 points. That is down 0.7%. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 383 points. That is down 0.9%. The Nasdaq 100, 120 points lower, and that is down 0.6%. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney, we're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We are streaming live on YouTube, so head over to Bloomberg. Head over to youtube.com and search Bloomberg Podcast Live, and that's where you'll find us. As John was just reporting, some disappointing numbers out of Nike, out of FedEx, and I'm going to approach the analysts we have from BI kind of the same way in my questioning. And let's start with Poonam Goyal, Senior U.S. Retail and E-commerce Analyst, and we'll start with the Nike. And Poonam, the question I have for you is kind of the same one I'm going to have for Lee Klaskow about FedEx, and how much of the kind of the weaker than expected results was company specific, i.e. not executing well, versus maybe just a weakening consumer out there? How does it apply to Nike?
So Nike was all company specific. And I would say that, a lot of this we expected. Nike's results will stay weak until they get their inventory realigned with sales. And that's not going to happen overnight. It will take at least 2 to 3 quarters at the minimum. So we do have some downside or some weak results for the next few quarters. But I will say that they are making the right moves. The new CEO, Elliott Hill, has a plan that we think will work. It will drive Nike back to be the lead and get the mind share that it has held for so many decades.
In that case, have we seen the bottom in the stock price?
Well, the shares have clearly come off from their highs and they're down again today, 7%. I'd say the bad news is out. So from here, they should continue to realign inventory. This upcoming fiscal fourth quarters of theirs is when they'll probably make the biggest push. And we should hopefully see inventory begin to normalize over the next 2 to 3 quarters.
Compared to their competitors, this inventory issue, this, I would argue, mismanagement of inventory, it feels to me, is it materially different than its competitors?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a Nike specific issue. So what happened here is that Nike has a lot of classic inventory that just isn't resonating with customers. And therefore they have to find ways to clear that, which they'll do through their outlets and the value wholesale channels. The other competitors, if you're talking about Adidas, Puma, or others, they don't have this issue because they have the right inventory for the most part in place, and therefore they will not have as many discounts as Nike will have over the coming 3 to 9 months.
At the same time, though, they talked about gross margins being also impacted by tariffs, and that would be an industry issue, right?
The tariffs is an industry issue, but the decline that they guided to, the 400 to 500 basis point decline in fiscal fourth quarter, the bulk of it is due to the markdowns that they will face as they clear this unwanted inventory. So tariffs does have an impact, but it's a very small part of that margin compression that they're forecasting.
Poonam, how did the company get in this position where they had this inventory that wasn't resonating with customers? Because I think of Nike as like really on top of knowing what the customers want and delivering some really cool products. What happened?
I think this all happened with the previous leadership when John Donahoe came on board right around the pandemic, and he had a strategy to go digital. So essentially pulling out of many wholesale channels in a meaningful way, where Nike was really focused on driving growth in digital. The product was changing, but it wasn't changing enough. You saw For example, they used a shoe and they just rolled out multiple color waves in it. There wasn't as much innovation as what the consumer is used to from Nike. So it was execution. It was just not having the right product. And I think they're back on their game now. They have a leader at helm that knows the product, that was a merchant. So they do have some work to do, but I think they're moving in the right direction.
Who took their share while they were stumbling, and can they get it back?
Everyone, the Ons, the Hokas, Adidas, you name it. I mean, when I went to a Foot Locker, let's say 7 years ago, it was largely Nike. Today, when I walk into a Foot Locker, I see everything in there. I see Nike, I see On, I see Hoka. So everyone took a little bit of it.
Yeah, Hoka's, I don't even know where they came from, but I see a lot of the kids around here wearing them.
Well, and the adults, too, are starting to wear them. They're super cool.
Well, they're
now.
adults, but they're kids to me here at Bloomberg.
But even like the older
And they're
adults,
wearing them to work, by the way.
The older kids are still doing it.
Are they?
Yeah.
All right.
This is not just like a 25-year-old thing.
Okay.
This is a broader. I think that David Weston has worn a Hoka.
That was so disappointing to me on so
I
many
don't know
levels.
if that's 100% true. I could be spreading false rumors, but it could be true. All right, Poonam, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Poonam Goyal, Senior USC Commerce and Retail Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Remember when we were all going to get this rate cutting cycle and it was going to be really great for commercial real estate and everything was going to level out and stabilize? Well, that seems to be definitely put on pause. Add in the economic uncertainty and it raises a lot of questions as to what happens to that sector. Hassam Naji is CEO of Marcus Millichap. They are a commercial real estate firm. They're based in California, but he's here in the studio. A lot of economic uncertainty and the Fed on pause. What does that mean for CRE?
Good morning. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me back. It means the fundamentals are very well intact. It means the enthusiasm that we saw post-election, because of the election outcome being favorable to economic growth and especially real estate tax treatment, with the 2017 Tax Reduction and Jobs Act more likely to be extended, is still there. But you're absolutely right. In the near term, we've seen a lot of our clients just pause for a minute to see what happens with tariffs, to see what happens with the economy. The slowdown is now beginning to sound more like a potential recession, although the data doesn't quite support that just yet. But there is more near-term concern. Once the dust settles with all of these kind of a week-to-week disruptions and the headlines and so on, I think those positive fundamentals and the essential enthusiasm that our clients feel will come back into the marketplace.
How about the lending market for commercial real estate today? If I wanted to go build a apartment building in Middletown, America, will my local bank lend to me, or do I have to go to alternative sources?
It depends very much by the project. So if we're talking about construction financing, that is the most difficult to get right now, because there is so much more caution by lenders than we've seen in normal times. However, on the flip side of it, there's way too much worry about distress sales and distress becoming contagion and banks having to mark down lots of portfolios. Have not seen it. Because of the fundamentals being healthy and lenders not being motivated by marking to market and dumping a bunch of product at a big discount. And you have to remember, commercial real estate is vast. It's not just office space. It's retail, it's apartments, it's self-storage units.
Well, let's talk about the apartment part, because in terms of building new supply, talk about uncertainty. It's a labor issue, it's a lumber issue, it's a steel issue, it's a supply issue. I mean, that is material risk for that sector.
Very much so, but any more constraint on new development is actually positive for the industry, because we've been building a lot of apartments over the last few years. Before all of this tariff talk, we saw a 50 to 70% decline in permits and new construction starts in the last, let's say, 6 months or so, which is very positive for the industry, because there was some overbuilding going on in about 5 or 6 metros. On the office front, I have to say, especially here in New York, most of your audience probably is unaware that the office market is actually coming back a lot faster than people would have expected. Just here in New York, the second half of 2024 showed the most absorption of office space we've seen since the pandemic recovery. Actually, about 8 million square feet between downtown and midtown Manhattan were absorbed in the second half of 2024. Vacancies came down more than a full percentage point because companies are making such a push to bring people back, and the economy is still expanding.
Have we seen any real distressed sales in New York or Boston or San Francisco, a building that we'd all know, and oh boy, it just sold at 50 cents on the dollar? I haven't seen too many of those stories.
Okay, but just to point out, he really wants to see these stories.
I want to see these stories because that for me will be.
You've asked me about that before.
Bottom of the market. You know?
Sure, there have been, but it's limited to obsolete, older office space, usually in urban markets that cannot be reused. Anything that has a chance of re-tenanting, being renovated, is not in the category of bargain basement pricing. It's only the true obsolete office product that we've seen. Some older shopping centers too, but not.
I get pitched by friends,
broadly.
my real estate friends. We got a new fund. We're going out. We think we're close to the bottom. I'm like, I'm not giving you anything because I'm not sure where we are. I haven't seen that story that's going to mark the bottom.
Well, that's the thing is that we always wait for it.
I know,
and then everyone
I
always
miss
says
it.
it's
Yep.
a good opportunity,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden it just never seems to materialize, or it's that one-off that we didn't.
Yep.
That we
I'll have to
missed.
tell you, opportunity funds that have been formed in the last 2-3 years in anticipation of this big buying opportunity have been very frustrated.
Yeah.
So there's situational distress, but there's no systemic distress.
Yep.
That's what distressed debt buyers from 2016. They've
Yeah.
had those funds ready to go for the turn, and
Right.
and nope, where's that distressed debt turn? Regionally, what do you guys like right now?
Well, the growth markets such as Texas, Arizona, Florida, Georgia. I was just in Atlanta yesterday. We had a presentation to about 400 of our clients in that market. Those continue to lead in demographics and job creation. I think California is getting a bad rap, and it's a diamond in the rough. A lot of those real estate prices have adjusted to the point where if you look at a replacement cost, it makes this window of time a very attractive one to get into commercial real estate if you can stomach the near-term, uncertainty around interest rates and so on. And we're seeing a record capital on the sideline wanting to get back in. There is a bid-ask spread still in the marketplace, but it's narrowing.
Hassam, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate getting some of your time. Hassam Naji, CEO of Marcus and Millichap, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We always like talking about commercial real estate. And again, as Hassam mentioned before, it's not what I used to think. I used to think it's just one big monolith of commercial real estate, but there's so many subsectors. Some are doing better than others here. But, I have seen a couple of stories about San Francisco, LA, some big market buildings do change hands at a big discount. But interesting, we haven't seen any banks really call it out in a big way. So we'll see how this plays out. Looking at the markets here, we are down 48 points on the S&P 500. It's about 0.7%. The Nasdaq's off about 103 points. That's 0.6% here. Looking at the bond market, a little bit of oomph in the bond market. The 10-year Treasury yield pulling back just a little bit, 4.22%. Oil pretty steady here, $68 a barrel. Bitcoin, we are down just slightly here. We're about $84,000 per token on that. And looking at the Bloomberg Dollar Index, stronger. We have a stronger dollar against some of the major currencies. The euro is at 1.08, not at the Tom Keene parity that he would like to see for his next trip over to Paris or Rome.
Toast.
That's gone. That ain't happening. So we'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. S&P 500 right now on track for its 5th consecutive week of declines. And setting the tone for the markets, the forecast from companies like FedEx to Nike, Micron Technology, and Lennar, all disappointing investors. Worst performing stock right now in the S&P 500. That belongs to FedEx. They lowered their full-year guidance for the 3rd consecutive quarter, and shares of FedEx right now are down 9.2%. Micron shares, they're down 7.4%. Then you have Nike shares down 6.6%. Lennar shares down close to 6%. In fact, there's only one of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500 that's higher right now. That belongs to communication services, and that's where you can find shares of AT&T. BT Group has approached major telecom companies about possible partnerships. And the S&P 500, 42 points lower. That is down 0.75% right now, 5620 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 352 points. The Nasdaq 100 down 150 points, and that is down 0.8%. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul.
All right, thanks so much, John Tucker. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news in business, economics, and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies in 130 industries all around the world. We also tap our amazing resources from our reporters also all around the world. And one of them now is Simone Foxman. She's a reporter for Bloomberg News, a quality team. Apparently, we have weekend essays. I didn't know that we had that, but we do. And Simone wrote the most recent
This is like
Bloomberg
a homework
essay.
assignment?
No, but it's a really long, in-depth piece that's not
Very
necessarily
long,
like
sorry.
a businessy big take, but a financial, this is what you need to know if you need to understand this industry. And this has to do with the overpromising and under-delivering of DEI. It's an impressive piece, Simone. Paul's been waiting for this for a while, as he said to you during commercial break. Set the scene for us. Where was 2020 in DEI, and then where is it now?
Well, DEI existed long before 2020, sometimes in the, in that specific acronym, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, it goes back as far as the 1960s, and then sort of evolved slowly over time. But as beginning in like the 1980s, you really had businesses making the case for diversity programs, even, pushing back against Ronald Reagan when he tried to repeal one of the executive orders that Trump repealed. And of course, it's evolved over that period of time. It hasn't worked particularly well, especially when elevating Black people in the workplace. But something seemed to really change in 2020. And frankly, it was the language around which corporate executives talked about it. They adopted a little bit more, I guess radical is the right word, language, very informed by scholarship, very interesting, very much what people wanted to hear, but it really changed also the reception of DEI in the workplace and beyond, and maybe helped create some of the conditions that we're seeing today, the kind of backlash.
Well, President Trump, I'm just reading in your note here, just weeks into his second term, President Donald Trump has delivered DEI a body blow. And you cite some real big companies here. BlackRock scrapped some of its DEI policies. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase maligned some of his as stupid stuff. And even the Walt Disney Company ended one of its flagship programs. So we're seeing real, I guess, change, I guess, is the way to say it. And is this for real this time? How does it feel?
Well, certainly some of these things, and I would note that some of these companies in specific have scrapped specific measures that might be risky under the law, considering what they see coming down from the Trump administration. We actually had news this morning that JP Morgan has renamed its DEI program DOI, that is diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. Whether the motive is is, eliminating confusion, or it's simply to conform to what the Trump administration seems to want, a little unclear at this moment. But the fact of the matter is that many companies are continuing to preserve things that have, at least for the last couple years, fallen under the DEI bucket. Those are things like maternity and paternity leave, mentorship programs, internship programs, but they're eliminating some others. And it remains to be seen what will be acceptable. Can you still call it diversity and inclusion? When does this run afoul of the Trump administration? A lot of these programs, a lot of those questions are still outstanding.
And we should point out that what changed in 2020 was the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And all in the midst of COVID as well. And that sort of really lit a fire under what DEI represented. It also seemed that after that, it went more from diversity and inclusion within a company to those companies that one company does business with. Like, if you don't have a diverse board, we won't do business with you. We won't lend you money if you don't reach these certain DEI criteria. Can we separate that from internal DEI?
Some of those things existed before. For example, supplier diversity initiatives, including targets for we want to do a certain amount of business with diverse suppliers, and we will not do business with you if you don't do that with your suppliers. Some of that goes back a real long way to the 1970s, 1980s. I think there was more of that, maybe more of that adopted in response to the murder of George Floyd and sort of the public outrage that followed. But I wouldn't say that didn't exist at all. It was the language that a lot of this was couched in. A lot of it was couched in a very historical language, frankly, the language of anti-racist scholars. And I'm not saying I would not go so far as to say that they're wrong or in any way, but what they were talking about is the need to mitigate racism in society through, proactive policy, and that you can't existing within a racist status quo is not being anti-racist. It's not enough. And what they were exhorting people and companies to do was go really far. And frankly, they were never convinced that corporate America was with them. They saw signs that they weren't there. So even as you had companies adopting these initiatives, even as you had them adopting their language, they were never really convinced that corporate America was going to do what they called for, which was true transformational change. And maybe that language, adopting that language, even if you're not adopting sort of the underlying precepts, maybe that the way people talked about it really changed the way DEI was received.
Well, in 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court ends affirmative action on higher education. To what extent did that impact the whole DEI kind of discussion in corporate America?
Yeah, certainly companies went back and did an audit of all of their DEI policies after that. There were elements, it was just the feeling that even though students for fair admission and the decision in that affirmative action case was really just focused on schools, that thinking was likely to transfer into other areas. And so if you had, for example, fellowships or internship programs that were only targeted toward a certain protected class, only open to Hispanics, only open to women even, you might consider opening that up to everyone. But a lot of companies did those things, a year ago at this point, knowing what kind of decision or 2 years ago, what decision was going to come down. And you've seen different changes, but I would say probably the bulk of those kind of twists and turns and tweaks happened a fair bit ago now. What we're seeing now is a bit more catering to what Trump and his administration may do, which is still an open question.
30 seconds. Is DEI dead or changed?
I think it will be...
Or unknown. Do we not know yet?
Probably unknown. Certainly some of the policies will live on. Will the acronym live? I don't know. And frankly, if you were going to ask me today, I kind of doubt it.
No, fair enough. I mean, just look at ESG. It feels like it's the same kind of thing. Like you kind of need a different
and ESG is generally it's still big in Europe and other parts of the world. It's just not
huge.
Here. Just not
yes,
here.
And it's really the environmental side of that too, in many ways. All right, Simone, really great stuff. I highly recommend that everyone read it. It's the weekend essay from Simone Foxman about what went wrong for DEI. All right, coming up, Lee Klaskow will be joining us, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Transport, Logistics, and Shipping Analyst, to recap those not great FedEx earnings. So is he sarcastic about it? Is this your inference?
Cynical.
Cynical. They're way past
love that.
sarcasm. This is Bloomberg.
listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Friday, everybody. We made it to the end of the week. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. Still a tough day for the market. S&P is off by 0.7%. The Nasdaq's off by about 0.6%. It just feels like a steady as she goes. Yesterday during the close, you could see the S&P desperately wanting to turn green. Could not do it, and we just continue to kind of roll over. We also have about $4.5 trillion worth of options expiring too. So what do you do? Like, is it safety? Is it run for the hills? Is it just wait till the second? Is it just hold everything until the back half of the year?
Yeah, it feels like April 2nd, it seems like it's just going to be a bigger and bigger date for some folks in this marketplace who are just looking for a little sense of clarity on maybe one of these big issues being the tariffs and, you know, how broad they will be and whether and who will they be placed upon. If you can take that out of the equation a little bit, maybe that will be a positive catalyst. The uncertainty was called out by a lot of companies. We heard Nike earlier in the day, FedEx also, and their stock trading off 9% on some weaker than expected earnings. That's a 52-week low for that stock. Lee Klaskow joins us. He's a senior transport, logistics, and shipping analyst who follows FedEx for Bloomberg Intelligence. Lee, I'm going to ask kind of the same question I asked to Poonam Goyal about Nike, which is how much of the underperformance in FedEx results was due to just maybe the market being a little softer, the consumer being a little softer, or FedEx specific issues?
Hey, Paul. I think it's a lot has to do with the fact that the macro is a little weaker than they thought, and the weakness that they were seeing is in the business to business volumes as well as the industrial economy. They have a lot of exposure to the industrial economy in their FedEx freight business, which is their less than truckload business. That business kind of disappointed on the earnings, while its parcel business, express business, slightly beat expectations. The company is going through a major transformation. It's been operated as a kind of bloated concern for a number of years. And over the last couple of years, they've been taking proactive steps into kind of righting that and reducing costs. They're also, doing things that that management thought was kind of taboo, if you will. They're now combining their ground and express networks in certain regions, and they're going to, eventually do that in the United States. Right now, it's being done in Canada. They're restructuring their air network, and the really goal is to build profitable density. And the problem is that they've generated a lot of cost savings, but some of that cost savings has gotten lost because the macro just isn't as strong as maybe they thought it's going to be. And looking forward, I think it's very difficult for FedEx or really anyone that deals with the economy to kind of forecast where they think volumes are going to go, because we really don't know. There's so much uncertainty, as you mentioned earlier, whether it's the risk from tariffs, whether it's the inflationary risk that could come from tariffs, whether it's getting rid of the de minimis exemptions for low-valued freight out of China. There's a lot of things that could weigh on results, at least looking into the near future.
For companies like these, what winds up being their base case when it comes to tariffs and trade? Like, they got to do something. They got to say something. So what's their base case?
I don't really know if they have a base case. The base case is that we are going to operate in the environment that is given to us, and it's not going to be special to us because our major competitor UPS is going to have to deal with a similar situation. So I think they just want to know what the rules of the road are, so then they can kind of operate. As you know, a lot of companies are holding back on capex because they just don't know. Are we going to? Is investing in Mexico a good thing or a bad thing for U.S. manufacturers? There's really a lot of things that are up in the air.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking at the earnings estimates out there, Lee, on the Bloomberg terminal, and the streets kind of got 15% earnings growth starting in their fiscal 26 year, their May 26 year, over the next couple of years. The stock trades at like 12 times earnings multiple. That looks pretty attractive, but I guess you have to buy off on management's ability to execute, right?
Yeah, we don't do buy, hold, sell here at Bloomberg Intelligence, as you know. But, at the end of the day, the things that they are doing today, when the demand environment is less volatile and more predictable, will be very good for margins. It's just like, how long are you willing to wait for that to happen? Is it going to be 4 years until things normalize, or is it going to be in 6 months when things normalize? We just really don't know. And there's a lot of other things that can happen as well. The Trump administration has talked about, adding fees and fines to, ships that are not made in the U.S. that come to dock in the U.S. That could have an impact on air freight, could move stuff to air freight because it becomes, I guess, more reasonable for certain items. So there's a lot of different things that can happen. We just don't know, as I mentioned earlier, what the rules of the road are, which are critical for us to figure out where things are headed from here. Because GDP expectations have been moderating, as you know, and these companies, FedEx and UPS, are tied to that.
Hey, Lee, we really appreciate it. Lee Klaskow, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Transport, Logistics, and Shipping Analyst. The stock well off the lows, but still down by about 9%. And that's kind of my question when it comes to these tariffs, right? Is it just push back demand? And once we get any kind of clarity, does it just pick back up, or is it never again seen demand? And no one knows that.
Yeah, I don't know. And some people will say, it is a tax on the consumer. A lot of people say, no, that's incorrect. It's a one-time adjustment up in prices. And then you go from there, and then the normal rate of inflation. Yeah, so I don't know. But I guess we'll find a little bit more about that on April 2nd.
Or if it's going to be a back half of the year thing. I'm not really sure about that. All right, for our listeners in the U.S., here is a reminder for you. You can listen to us via satellite radio on SiriusXM Channel 121. Access the world's only global audio business network coast to coast 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio on SiriusXM Channel 121 is presented by Oracle. Stay tuned for the latest market news and industry research. The next hour of Bloomberg Intelligence starts right now. When you're looking at the NASDAQ 100 on track for its 5th consecutive week of declines, longest weekly slide since 2022.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Friday, everybody. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We have a great hour lined up for you. We're going to dig into all the business stories moving the markets today. First, we're going to take you live at Heathrow Airport with Alex Morgan, our Bloomberg News reporter, on the nightmare for travelers unfolding at one of the biggest airports in the world. Then Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst, will be joining us in the political stories of the day. And it's Friday, so we got to check in with Munis, with Eric Kozatsky of Bloomberg Intelligence, and Carnival actually doing pretty well. We'll talk to Brian Egger, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Gaming and Lodging Analyst. But let's kick it all off for you right now with the Bloomberg Business Flash. And for that, we go to Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. We are looking at a down day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Your key takeaway right now, off-session lows. Looking at the S&P, down 24, 56, 38 where we stand right now, down by 0.4%. However, we are looking at 5 weekly losses in the row, 7 losses in the last 8, according to Bloomberg data. Again, the S&P right now down 0.4. The Dow down 223 now, down 0.5. NASDAQ lower by 49. That is a drop there of 0.3%. Your 10-year 4.23% with a 2-year 3.92%. Spot gold down $30 the ounce, $3,014, down 1%. West Texas Intermediate crude 68.30 a barrel, up 0.3%. And Bitcoin down 0.4%, 84,203 right now on Bitcoin. Nike shares after earnings, they are trading lower right now, tumbling by 6.9%. But what about tariffs and the impact on the apparel industry in general and Nike in specific? That question this morning for Poonam Goyal, Senior Retail Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, and she was a guest this morning right here on Bloomberg Intelligence.
The tariffs is an industry issue, but the decline that they guided to, the 400 to 500 basis point decline in fiscal fourth quarter, the bulk of it is due to the markdowns that they will face as they clear this unwanted inventory. So tariffs does have an impact, but it's a very small part of that margin compression that they're forecasting.
Bloomberg's Poonam Goyal, and again underscoring Nike shares down 7.1%. FedEx after earnings, we were just talking with Arlie Klaskow, down now by 9.3% after earnings. And Micron also reported last night, right now it is down by 7.8%. The other major story that we continue to monitor, yes, we'll have a lot more coming up on Bloomberg Intelligence. London's Heathrow Airport had its worst disruption in at least 2 decades due to a nearby fire that cut power to the hub. Stay with Bloomberg for the latest on this story. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We are streaming live on YouTube as well. So head over to youtube.com, search Bloomberg Podcast, and that's where you'll find us. As Charlie was just reporting, been reporting all morning, just an extraordinary story coming out of London. Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest in the world, shut down after a fire nearby. Worst disruption in years. Alex Morgan is a reporter for Bloomberg News. He is live from Heathrow Airport. Alex, any updates to this story? Have we heard about maybe what caused it and how it's playing in terms of that fire?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me just bring you right up to date. We've had a statement from the National Grid in the UK, they're providing the power, saying that they've managed to restore an interim solution to get power back to Heathrow. But we know that the airport is closed all the way up until midnight tonight at a minimum. Now, this is one of the world's busiest airports. If you look behind me and, listen in the skies, nothing, not a plane in sight. And I can tell you that is really quite remarkable. Analysts calling this unprecedented disruption. This is a major piece of kit when it comes to the UK's infrastructure. This is the busiest airport in Europe. It's the 4th most active in the world, according to data from last year. And here we are, not a plane in sight. Huge disruption. We know about 1,300 flights minimum have been affected. Hundreds of thousands of passengers around the world. And, you're asking me the question there that everyone wants to know the answer to. How did this happen? How will it be prevented in the future? And when will we move from this interim solution, which they're talking about, getting some power back to get the lights on, to the airport operating normally? I think it's fair to say that will be days, not hours.
It's amazing that it's been this long and we still don't have those answers. But the question that I had is, who pays for this? Like, if I'm a traveler and I'm stuck in London and I got to spend another $2,000 to just like house myself and go in a hotel, do I get that money recouped?
Well, that is the question, and fair to say, I think we've seen a lot of travelers here, people who maybe didn't get the news not to come to the airport today. Faces, I think you're seeing around the world, actually, because obviously, while Heathrow, of course, is a major, destination where you want to be coming to the UK and leaving, it's also where people transit through, right? So flights all over the world. In fact, when the airport was closed, there were aircraft in the air coming from the Middle East and, of course, crossing the Atlantic as well. People around the world now asking of their airlines, of their travel providers, what are my rights? What am I able to get back? It's fair to say that some people have been complaining here in London that they're seeing prices hiked up for nearby hotels. That's something people on social media are saying. But a lot of passengers are very frustrated. They're wanting to know the answers to these questions. And at the moment, Heathrow hasn't given a clear answer as to when the power will be back on. We just know it's an unprecedented full-day closure. But obviously the impact on that, it's not just a case of the flights today. The planes are now in the wrong position. They've got to reposition the crews, the aircraft, and of course the passengers. So we are looking at days of disruption.
Wow. Yep. And also you have to wonder too, like, can the airlines, like how well can the airlines adapt their technology to deal with this?
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's just, you can see how this could ripple for days. Alex Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. Alex Morgan, reporter for Bloomberg News, live from Heathrow. Market Drivers Today is brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio. Small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to Commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. All right, markets selling off. Here's Charlie Pellet was just reporting. Let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. We're joined by Bloomberg's Denitsa Sekova, a Bloomberg cross-asset reporter. What are you looking at here today, Denitsa?
We're looking at the airlines. We're looking at Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and it seems like we're having some breaking news, and at least there are sources saying that perhaps Boeing is going to be the next generation fighter jet. At least the price is moving downwards. It was up 2% today, and now we're seeing this downward pressure. Boeing was also up earlier today. It's just happening now, so we don't have confirmation on that. But obviously, planning the project has to take into account that Elon Musk has publicly criticized the F-35 jets. While, for example, Trump obviously has complained over the delay in the next generation of Air Force One planes, which are coming from Boeing. So we have this conflict of both of them having criticisms towards the two companies. The winner of the contest is expected to be announced today. And the announcement will be made 2 years after Air Force issued a formal request for proposals for the next generation air dominance fighter. Obviously, this is a very big deal. So we're expecting to see a lot of volatility in the stocks.
We are also waiting for President Trump delivering remarks at the White House with Secretary of Defense. We don't say what they're talking about, but you have to, add a couple one and one together equals two. So maybe we'll get that. We're going to bring that to you, of course, as it happens. You're also looking at Micron as well. So the quarter seemed really good, but like maybe a little miss on the gross margins, but investors were not loving that.
We know investors are very sensitive towards AI. It was actually a really good earnings report, but gross margins were 37.9%, which is below the estimate at 38.4%. And this is really the only part where investors are really concerned. The margins took attention from strong sales. For the current quarter, we're seeing demand for artificial intelligence that continues to be very strong. Demand for components used in data centers. that develop and run artificial intelligence software. So there are many bright spots in the report. Its traditional chips for phones and PCs have been weaker. That's another weak point perhaps investors are worried about. We're seeing a very strong reactions. Micron shares fell about 8% today, but the stock is up 22% year to date. So you can imagine if going forward, some of those worries clear out, that gross margin issue gets fixed, there's still a lot of optimism in the stock.
And then last up, FedEx guy hit it. It's off the lows though, so let's say that.
Indeed, it's now about 9%. Earlier today it was down as much as 12%. So clearly some of those losses are being paired. Year to date, the loss still is very big. But we know those reversals happen very fast. The losses came after the parcel delivery company lowered its full year guidance for a third consecutive quarter. We're seeing that theme of a weak consumer weighing in. And of course, the Donald Trump escalating trade war. This is something the company has sound alarms on. And they see a big exposure to, a broad part of the global economy. And the latest outlook assumes that the global economic and political trade environment doesn't weaken any further. So we are not seeing a lot of the current uncertainty really priced in. As we know, a lot of the headlines are still coming in. So yes, some relief from the big drop today, but the stock is under a lot of pressure still.
All right. Very good. That is our Stocks on the Move segment today. Denitsa Sakova, Bloomberg cross-asset reporter, delivering that today. Focus on Washington, D.C. I think it will be pretty much going forward for the next 4 years. That's why we are fortunate to have Nathan Dean, Senior Policy Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's down there in D.C. Hey, Nathan, we're going to get to the tariff stuff in a minute, but again, President Trump and Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth, they're scheduled to deliver remarks at 11 a.m. East Coast time. Any sense down there in D.C. what the topic is going to be here?
This is actually one of the biggest questions we've had all morning is, Elon Musk was over at the Pentagon just a few minutes ago learning about, plans, in terms of the U.S. defense strategy towards China, for example. But, this also could be an announcement of an additional, strategic partnership with a private sector. This is just one of those things where, unfortunately, we just really don't know what's going to happen, and we're certainly going to be paying attention to it because a lot of the things that are happening over the Department of Defense are just incremental changes. And, in terms of impacted defense contractors, that's one of the bigger questions we have is, as DOGE makes its way through the Department of Defense, are there going to be large cuts? Are there going to be impacts to these defense contractors? And unfortunately, we just have to stay tuned.
When you're getting all the headlines that come fast and furious, can we separate signal from noise? So what's the real policy in general from anything we get from the Trump administration that you can then put into actionable theses for companies versus just the noise, like executive orders about the Department of Education that how do you possibly filter that through to the equity market, for example?
Yeah, so obviously we go back to the idea that there are three ways that things get done in Washington: it's regulation, legislation, and these executive orders. Now, regulation happens, it just takes a very long time. So if you see President Trump come out and say to Secretary Bessent, for example, and say, I want to change this thing called the ESLR. Well, the banks need to perk up their ears because they can do this. It's going to take a long time. When it comes to legislation, we've talked about this in the past. Is it via reconciliation? That's going to take a little bit of lengthy time. Or is this a bill that's going to require Democratic support, meaning things don't really happen all that quickly, if it does at all? But when it comes to the executive orders, just remember, what does President Trump have the authority to do? Things within the executive branch. And so things like the Department of Education, where he says, look, we're going to cut the Department of Education. For those of us in Bloomberg Intelligence, we don't really put all that much effort into that because the incremental impacts of those policies really don't drive down to the key sectors that we cover and that we assist our clients with. So we look at financials, TMT, healthcare, antitrust, tax, and then energy and so forth. But outside of that, you're looking a little bit more in terms of nuanced companies in specific sectors.
Hey, Nathan, it seems like this market's being held hostage a little bit by maybe April 2nd, which would be a day when presumably we'll get some more clarity on the scope and size and types of tariffs that President Trump is thinking about. But there's probably also a good chance that he'll just defer it again. What are you telling your clients?
Yeah, so Liberation Day, as President Trump is calling April 2nd, there's two things to keep in mind. One is, what is the pattern that we're seeing with President Trump and these tariffs? You have a shotgun announcement. I'm going to put tariffs on. And then you have subsequently a negotiation where these tariffs are either walked back or there's, a different change. This can happen over hours, if not days. But incrementally, these tariffs are coming in. Non-USMCA goods are on tariffs. China has tariffs. So these tariffs are coming. But when it comes to April 2nd, the other thing you keep in mind is, are they going to go into fruition on April 2nd? Probably not. More likely than not, you're going to see another, kick the can, if you will. In 2 weeks, this is going to happen. Is it going to be specific sectors? Bloomberg News is reporting that's what they're discussing right now. President Trump has called out automakers, for example, significant automaker exposure there, especially to those in the European Union. And the third aspect of this is that the Trump administration is including non-tariff measures like quotas, inspections, and value-added tax. So if you include the value-added tax as part of that tariff discussion, as the Trump administration is saying, that exposes the European Union a lot more to this than the tariff versus tariff.
Just some breaking news. It looks like Bloomberg News has confirmed this, that the Boeing is said to win the U.S. next generation fighter jet contract. Remember, just moments ago, Boeing stock was moving higher, Lockheed Martin moving lower. President Trump will officially expected to announce who will get that contract. It looks like, from our reporting, that Boeing has won that U.S. next generation fighter jet contract. Okay, so if April 2nd isn't this moment where everything will then be resolved, how long does the uncertainty last before it becomes permanent in terms of how business leaders think about it?
Well, that's the biggest, I think, difficult question for business leaders today is this uncertainty and how are they going to plan for the future. But, President Trump, I don't think is essentially looking at that at the moment. You think about things that drive President Trump. A lot of people say that President Trump likes to have a green stock market. I say that as well. But President Trump also is not really looking at the stock market as we speak when it comes to the tariff debate because the stock market is declined in response to this. Now, I will say that what we are telling our clients is that we think sticker shock is something that could potentially drive President Trump to change his mind. And we haven't really seen that sticker shock yet. Look, the egg prices, are still high, but, President Trump has a story for that. But if we begin to see things like Canadian potash, for example, really hit American farmers, and American farmers are then calling President Trump or calling their allies on Capitol Hill saying, we need you to do something like with this, then you potentially could see President Trump change his mind. But going back to this idea of incremental tariffs are being brought on board, at the same time you have this process of significant statement, a negotiation, a walk back, and a kick the can for a debate another day. Incrementally, these tariffs are still coming.
All right, Nathan, super appreciate it. Thank you so much, Nathan Dean. He is Bloomberg Intelligence. Wow, that was tough. There, title of our show, Bloomberg Intelligence. There we go. Senior policy analyst. Again, the news of the morning is that Boeing is said to win the U.S. next generation fighter jet contract, beating out Lockheed Martin. That's part of the Next Gen Air Dominance program, which aims to develop a new fighter jet that's going to operate with drones and replace the F-22 Raptor. That jet's supposed to enter into service in the 2030s, and the Air Force plans to spend up to $20 billion on that kind of research and development through 2029. We'll keep you updated on that as it continues.
It's interesting. The shares of Boeing up 4.8%. The shares of Lockheed Martin off 5%.
All right, coming up, Eric Satsky, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Municipal Strategist, joining us. It's Friday, so it's Munis. We'll break that down. And Brian Egger, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Gaming and Lodging Analyst on Carnival's bookings. Those numbers were really good from Carnival, right?
I thought so, yeah.
But not good enough, maybe? We'll dissect. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. As we have been reporting, Boeing has won a contract to design and build the U.S.'s next generation fighter jet, beating out rival Lockheed Martin for the multi-billion-dollar contract. Now, this is according to sources, but President Trump scheduled to announce the decision at the White House alongside Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Right now, we got Boeing up 5.3%, and Lockheed Martin shares, they are down by 5.3%. And U.S. investors in ByteDance, including General Atlantic, Susquehanna, KKR, and Cotu, all working with Oracle on a deal designed to convince President Trump that the video app will be free of Chinese control. This according to the Financial Times, citing sources. Stocks lower, on track for yet another losing week. Right now, the S&P down 37, down 0.7%. Dow Industrials down 243, down 0.6%. Nasdaq lower by 103, drop there of 0.6%. The 10-year 4.23%, the 2-year 3.92%. Gold now down 1%, still above 3,013. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.2%, 68.19 a barrel. And Bitcoin right now at 83,800, down by 0.8%. Briefly, Target is cutting bonuses for its salaried employees as the retailer's sales and profit fell on soft consumer spending. Target shares down 0.9%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Now on Bloomberg Intelligence, Munis in Focus.
All right, today's Focus on Munis is brought to you by BAM Mutual. BAM Mutual insures municipal bonds that finance essential infrastructure and provides guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Learn more about municipal bond credit quality. Visit bambonds.com. Eric Kazatsky joins us. He's a senior municipal strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Princeton via Zoom. Eric, talk to us about the municipal bond market. A lot of uncertainty out there across all asset classes. How's the municipal bond market been handling it this year to date?
Yeah, hey, good morning. Look, we're trying to hang in there, and we're feeling it on the return front a little bit, right? Just to give you some numbers, we're down about 116 basis points this month. We had been off to a pretty solid start, but a lot of this just comes down to, like you said, there's a lot of volatility in the markets, and we're really not seeing sort of the love that the Treasury market has gotten in the last week and a half. We're hoping that we sort of catch up when we get past tax season, though.
So what's that done to new issuance here? Where are we kind of year to date on municipalities coming to this market?
Yeah. New issuance has been quite strong, right? So 23% just for generic tax-exempt issuance year over year. It's really sort of keeping in line with a lot of street estimates as far as how much supply is going to come into the market. But a topic that I know that you love to bring up on time occasion is really that taxable muni market, and that's up about 15% year over year. Now, our belief here is that as rates tick lower, we're going to see even more participation from issuers on the taxable muni front. Because if you recall, back in 2020 when rates were sort of at the bottom there, taxable munis were making up about 32% of all issuance in our market. Are we going to get back to that point? Probably not, but we're hoping there'll be more significance.
Talk to us about the higher education segment of the market. I've been seeing more and more name universities come to the market. Is this in response to, I guess, threatened funding from the Trump administration?
Absolutely. We could certainly think of that as a knock-on effect, right? When you're talking about cutting funding, or more importantly, taxing a lot of those, high endowment institutions, they sort of want to get out ahead of that. Not that we think, Harvard going from paying, $5 million a year to, $100 million a year as far as like tax on endowments is going to, have a downgrade situation. But, they sort of want to get ahead of any noise in the marketplace, right?
Where is the biggest noise right now in the marketplace?
I mean, I think the underappreciated noise in our market is really local credit quality. We have this sentiment monitor that we, created, I want to say almost like a year ago at this point, and we've been tracking muni credit, and we're very much on the opposite side of the coin as the rating agencies. They continue to sort of be pretty strong in their upgrade cycle. We're seeing a lot of sort of small fissures and cracks pop up. A lot of that stimulus money from the pandemic has rolled off. You're hearing a lot more about budget cuts and deficits on the local level, and now you have threats to funding that are rolling down, either education or NIH, that are really going to sort of impact some of these localities. And we're waiting to see how that plays out.
So where's the credit quality in your market, in municipal bond market these days, Eric? And what kind of stress tests can you do?
Yeah, I mean, look, overall, I think the muni market is a safer place to be than the corporate market. You know, we're an uncorrelated, risk asset that is really an appreciated sort of investment thesis that's coming from investors overseas, right? A lot of those folks who want to be in taxable munis are using the muni market as sort of a proxy to get U.S. risk-denominated assets, but not have exposure to the equity and corporate side of the equation, right? So we have a low default history. That is another positive. So, I don't want to sort of say that we're projecting defaults. I just think that there's probably more of a likelihood of spread widening as we go through this year, which at the end of the day, spreads are abnormally tight. So we're probably looking at more of a return to normalization when it comes to risk compensation than anything else.
Wait, so am I hearing that right, that overseas investors are interested in the muni market in the U.S.?
On the taxable side, yeah, absolutely.
But we keep hearing about money kind of leaving the U.S. and going elsewhere, and the concern is like, will that hit, say, the credit market? You don't see any signs of that?
Not as of yet in our market. No, there is still a lot of interest in a lot of these large taxable municipal issuers, the state of California being one of them, one of the most liquid names in our market. And yeah, there's a little bit of noise when the issues of the wildfire were going on, but overall, it's a name that's continually well bid in our marketplace.
All right, Eric, thanks so much for joining us. Always appreciate getting your thoughts on the municipal bond market. Eric Kazaski, Senior Municipal Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Princeton. Carnival Cruise Line out with some numbers. I thought they were pretty good, but I know investors are really concerned about consumer-facing stocks. We saw the airlines last week take their guidance down pretty substantially across the board, and other consumer-facing companies and industries are feeling the uncertainty in the marketplace. Brian Egger joins us, Senior Gaming and Lodging Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Brian, what did we learn from Carnival Cruise Line about the cruise business these days?
Yeah, I think the good news is that we're continuing to see robust bookings demand and record high fares and pricing. So that really remains intact. There were certainly some acknowledgement on the earnings call about the fact that we're in an environment characterized by a lot of economic uncertainty, but at least to date, the bookings trajectory is quite strong, and they actually raised their revenue yield guidance for the year.
Were you surprised by the stock reaction?
Well, I think there's a lot of underlying caution, and the company itself acknowledged that, and so it's difficult to parse stock's reaction versus what's happening in the overall market. But I think there was a sense of a good bookings trajectory for the year. They are also in a position, by the way, where they're only looking for slightly below 1% capacity growth this year. So they entered this year with also very little incremental capacity, which is probably more favorable in a backdrop of economic uncertainty if you're concerned about that. But the bookings trends, the yield pace overall, those metrics look to be quite strong, as is the environment for cost growth.
Talk to us about the positioning of Carnival, Norwegian, and Royal Caribbean, the three publicly traded ones, because I'm looking at their stock price performance over the prior 12 months, and I got Royal Caribbean up 50%, but I got Norwegian kind of down a couple of percent, and Carnival up 24%. Do investors really differentiate between the three?
There's some differentiation. Carnival has certainly achieved kind of its 12% return on invested capital target a year earlier. Royal Caribbean in an investor day, I guess it was a week or two ago, gave out equally encouraging guidance with respect to their ability to realize the return on capital and capital return goals and policies. So, there is certainly some distinction among them, but Carnival, I think, recently has done quite a good job in moderating, controlling cost growth, obtaining higher yield projections, and trying to maintain its pace towards some recently articulated return on invested capital goals.
Is there one cruise line, though, that you feel like can win better in an uncertain environment, either based on their clientele or where they service, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's an open question. There are some lines like Viking and Norwegian, which arguably are positioned more towards the luxury part of the business. Some have different geographic exposures. Carnival, for its part, with its Carnival brand, has a very, very strong contemporary market, mass market exposure, but also has some high-end brands. I think if you were concerned about the state of the consumer, it really depends on which geographies or product segments will be affected. But broadly speaking, the industry is quick to emphasize the relative affordability of cruising and desirability that compared to land-based vacation options.
In the cruise business, Brian, when the economy slows down, maybe not in a recession, but certainly slows down, where do you typically see it in the cruise business? Is it cancellations? Is it just advanced bookings just kind of fall off a little bit?
I mean, and I would point out historically that bookings demand and passenger growth has really historically done a very good job at keeping pace with supply growth. But what you would typically see is potentially softer bookings, but that's usually most manifest in the first couple months of a new year, particularly January, February, the so-called peak bookings period or wave season. And that season was quite strong. So there's always potential for uncertainty, but I will say we got through the peak cruise booking season of the first couple months of calendar 25 in a fairly good position, which I believe it's about 80% of their 25 capacity is currently booked. So we're watchful signs of any potential slowdown, but at least as we stand here today, the trajectory has been maintained.
Before we let you go, if the cruise lines are sort of set up well versus land-based vacations, is it the opposite then for hotels?
Yeah, I think for hotels overall, we're seeing a fairly strong growth of RevPAR or revenue per available yield growth. The main difference, of course, is that the cruise lines are a leisure business, whereas hotels get, let's say, roughly 2/3 of their business from corporate travelers and from independent business travelers. So you've got just a different type of customer mix, whereas the cruise industry being much more leisure-centric, that plays well to the strength of the consumer.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Brian Egger, Senior Gaming Analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. Right now, let's go down to Washington, D.C. President Trump is speaking.
That love them and cherish them, including their parents, by the way, who will be totally involved in their education, along with the boards and the governors and the states. And it's going to be a great situation. I guarantee that in a few years from now, I hope I'm going to be around to see it, but I think we're going to see a lot of it. I think that you're going to have tremendous results. You're going to have results like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, a lot of the countries that do so well. I think you're going to have a lot of those results. If you look at Iowa and Indiana and Idaho, so many places that run so well, Florida, Texas, big ones, you're going to have great education, much better than it is now at half the cost. And we're not even doing it as a cost item, although you will save probably half, maybe more than that. And you're not going to be at the bottom of the list. You're going to be much higher. And maybe you'll be, I will guarantee some of the states will be at the top of the list. They'll be comparable or better than these number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries, the countries that are in the top 5 positions. So that's, to me, it's very exciting, and it's been received very well. So I just wanted to tell you about the student loans and special needs. But we're here for a reason today that is very exciting, and I'm thrilled to announce that at my direction, the United States Air Force is moving forward with the world's first 6th generation fighter jet. Number 6th generation. Nothing in the world comes even close to it. And it'll be known as the F-47. The generals picked a title, and it's a beautiful number, F-47. It's something the likes of which nobody has seen before in terms of all of the attributes of a fighter jet. There's never been anything even close to it, from speed to maneuverability to what it can have to payload. And this has been in the works for a long period of time. After a rigorous and thorough competition between some of America's top aerospace companies, the Air Force is going to be awarding the contract for the next generation air dominance platform to Boeing. As you know, was highly competed for. There was a lot of competition, generals, and it's been going on for a long time. Very, very tough competition, but this plane is produced numbers that nobody's ever seen before. The F-47 will be the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. An experimental version of the plane has secretly been flying for almost 5 years, and we're confident that it massively overpowers the capabilities of any other nation. There's no other nation. We know every other plane. I've seen every one of them, and it's not even close. This is a next level. You know, level 5 is good. This is level 6, they say. The F-47 is equipped with state-of-the-art stealth technology. It's virtually unseeable and unprecedented power. It's got the most power of any jet of its kind ever made. Maneuverability, likewise, is there's never been anything like it, despite the power and speed. Its speed is top. It's over 2, which is something that you don't hear very often. America's enemies will never see it coming. Hopefully we won't have to use it for that purpose, but you have to have it. And if it ever happens, they won't know what the hell hit them. A new fleet of these magnificent planes will be built in the air during my administration over the next couple of years. It's ready to go. They've already built much of what has to be built in terms of production, including the sheds. We'll ensure that the USA continues to dominate the skies. We've given an order for a lot. We can't tell you the price because it would give way to some of the technology and some of the size of the plane, good-sized plane. This contract also represents a historic investment in our defense industrial base, helping to keep America at the cutting edge of aerospace and technology. Our allies are calling constantly. They want to buy them also, and certain allies will be selling them, perhaps toned-down versions. We like to tone them down about 10%, which probably makes sense because someday maybe they're not our allies, right? But I would like to ask Secretary Hegseth, who's doing a fantastic job. He's really been very inspiring in so many ways. And I must say that before he speaks, we have had record people wanting to join our military in the last 2.5 months, literally since this, I think probably since the election, November 5th, but especially since we came to office and since I announced Pete. He's young, he's smart, he's strong, he loves it, and they love him. But we've had record numbers of people wanting to join our military. Now, if you go back 6 months, it was the exact opposite. You had record numbers of people not wanting to join the military. Now you have record numbers of people wanting to be in our military. And that's a great honor. That shows you we're really on the right track. So, Pete, maybe you'd say a few words.
Sure.
Please.
Well, Mr. President, this is a big day. This is a big day for our warfighters. This is a big day for our country, a big day in the world. The name of this program is the Next Generation of Air Dominance. And Mr. President, because of your leadership, your clarity, America is going to have generations in the future of air dominance because of this 6th generation fighter. We've had the F-15, we have had the F-16, the F-18, the F-22, the F-35. Now we have the F-47, which sends a very direct, clear message to our allies that we're not going anywhere, and to our enemies that we will be able to project power around the globe unimpeded for generations to come. Mr. President, this is a gift to my kids and your kids, to my grandkids and your grandkids. This is a historic investment in the American military, in the American industrial base, in American industry that will help revive the warrior ethos inside our military, which we're doing, rebuild our military, which the previous administration did not do, by the way, Mr. President. They paused this program and were prepared to potentially scrap it. We know this is cheaper, longer range, and more stealthy. President Trump said we're reviving it and we're doing it. And then we are also going to reestablish deterrence. Under the previous administration, we looked like fools. Not anymore. President Trump has reestablished American leadership. The F-47 is part of it. And Mr. President, thank you for having the courage to do it and leading the way for all our warfighters.
Thank you very much, Pete. One of the things I will say, but the generals are going to speak in just a couple of seconds, but this plane flies with drones. It flies with many, many drones, as many as you want, and it's a technology that's new, but it doesn't fly by itself. It flies with many drones, as many as we want, and that's something that no other plane can do. So I'd like to introduce, if I might, Air Force Chief of Staff General David Alvin, and also General Dale White, two incredible people that I've known over the years, but I got to know them really well over the last few months. And would you say a few words, please, General?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your unwavering commitment to our military. I will say this is a big day. This is a big day for our United States Air Force as well. You know, air dominance is not a birthright, but it's become synonymous with American air power. But air dominance needs to be earned every single day. And since the earliest days of aerial warfare, brave American airmen have jumped into their machines, taken to the air, and they've cleared the skies. And whether that be clearing the skies so we can rain down destruction on our enemies from above, or we can clear the path to the ground forces below. That's been our commitment to the fight, and that's really been our promise to America. And with this F-47 as the crown jewel in the next generation air dominance family of systems, we're going to be able to keep that promise well into the future. I also want to thank everyone from industry and within government, our engineers who have worked tirelessly on this program to bring it where we are right now today. This shows that American talent, American skill, and American determination are second to none, because this platform is second to none. So we believe that this provides more lethality, it provides more capability, more modernized capability in a way that is built to adapt. This, along with our collaborative combat aircraft the President talked about with drones, this is allowing us to look into the future and unlock the magic that is human-machine teaming. And as we do that, we're going to write the next generation of modern aerial warfare with this. This enables us to do this. The manner in which we put this program together puts more control in the hands of the government, so we can update and adapt at the speed of relevance, at the speed of technology, not at the speed of bureaucracy. This is more Air Force. This is more options for the President. We say as our mission in the United States Air Force is to fly, fight, and win air power anytime, anywhere. If you want to go anywhere, you have to have a platform that gets you anywhere. This provides the President options from the very one end, which is a quick response, and then we can get right back into fighting stance without having to deploy troops that are going to take maybe months and cost more lives. We can be back in fighting stance, and maybe we restore that deterrence. All the way to decisive victory as part of a joint force that is the most lethal and capable military ever known in history. That's what we provide now, and this allows us to provide it into the future. It's more deterrence, more capability. It's what peace through strength looks like into the future, Mr. President. And so we're very proud to do that. And all we can say is, on behalf of the United States Air Force, let's deliver.
Thank you very much. Thank you, General. Would you like to say something?
That's right. I'll just double down what the chief said.
He knows what to do.
It's a generational
He knows who the boss is.
That's exactly right. Air superiority is what it's all about, and this is what we'll deliver.
That's great. Thank you very much. Great job. We've worked together long and hard on this, and this was a big secret. In fact, we don't show too much of the plane for that reason. You see what we show? You see how beautiful that is, but that's just a very small part of it.
Sure.
I wasn't surprised. I was wondering how much are you going to show if they came in with that. You see a wheel in the front? That's about it. Any questions?
Mr. President Trump, is 80,000 pages of documents is a lot to sift through.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us who killed Kennedy?
Well, I was given the task of releasing that because many presidents have gone through it and they haven't released. And I said, release. We even released Social Security numbers. I didn't want anything deleted. They said, sir, what about Social Security? People long gone, but they're long gone, so I can't imagine. But I said, if you don't delete it, if you do delete it, we have people are going to say, why did you delete it? There's something in there. So we gave Social Security, we gave everything. And the rest is for you to look at, Peter. You're going to see whether or not you see anything. But we've given it. We're doing it with Dr. Martin Luther King, too. They're preparing all of that. They're going to release everything. And whoever else they want. I mean, we have nothing. We really have nothing to hide. We shouldn't have. When a lot of time goes by. But with the Kennedy files, in particular, they were going crazy on them. I don't think there's anything that's earth-shattering, but you'll have to make that determination. In those, it's 80,000. It's actually 88,000, and we have some additional things, as you know, come out today. And for that, you can go to the offices and you can see whatever you want to see. Everything is out there, totally open. The additional stuff is available later on today. You go over to the offices and you can have it immediately. and you'll make a determination.
And on something else, these Trende Aragua guys, because of your executive order, they are designated as foreign terrorists.
Yeah.
If ISIS or Al-Qaeda foreign terrorists were operating here in the United States, cops would probably be shooting first and asking questions later. And so what is the difference between terrorists, between somebody like an ISIS or an Al-Qaeda operative versus a MS-13 or Trende Aragua?
Well, these are people that focus on destroying people in their homes. They're not as international in that sense. They're a group of thugs. They come from Venezuela. They come from the prisons of Venezuela. They're very, very dangerous people, but they didn't look so dangerous when the guards took care of the situation from El Salvador. And I want to thank the president. He's a friend of mine. He's done a great job. But I just can't imagine that the Democrats are taking this issue where they want to have them back. You know, so now they have men playing in women's sports. They have transgender for everyone. They have open borders. They have all of their crazy policies that are, I think, 95-5, not 90-10, okay? And their new policy is, let's bring Trende Aragua back into our country. Let's bring the worst, these are the worst gang members there are. They looked amazingly frail, though, by the way they were handled. It's very amazing. You know, they weren't, when they were in Colorado, cutting the fingers off a man because he made a phone call to the police. They seemed a lot tougher then than they did when they were having their heads shaved and they were in shackles. They're tough people. They're bad people. We don't want them in our country. We can't let a judge say that he wants him. You know, he didn't run for president. He didn't get much more than 80 million votes. And we just can't let that happen. It'd be so bad for our country. I won on the basis of getting criminals out of our country that were let in. It was called unforced error. They were let in by Biden, incompetently let in, and let in by the millions, actually. 21 million people. I believe it's 21 million. And that's not even including the gotaways, but these are rough people. We want them out of our country. And I won the election based at least partly on that, and that's a big part, yeah?
Mr. President, there's something. I don't know if you saw this. Tim Walz is now saying about Trump supporters, and forgive me, I'm just reading a quote from Tim Walz, I think I could kick most of their ass.
Oh, boy, he'd be in trouble.
Is there any way to know?
Well, he's a loser, you know, I mean, the guy's a loser. He lost an election. He played a part. You know, usually a vice president doesn't play a part, they say. I think Tim played a part. I think he was so bad that he hurt her. But she hurt herself, and Joe hurt them both. They didn't have a great group, but I would probably put him at the bottom of the group.
Have you heard that Biden wants to get back involved for Democratic politicians, fundraising and campaigning against your policies?
I hope so. I hope so.
Mr. President, there are several families. Mr. President, there are families from some of the people.
Who are you with?
I'm with La Nación newspaper from Argentina. There are families from some of the people that were on those flights to El Salvador that claim that they're not criminals, they're not members of Trende Aragua, of MS-13. What can you tell them, and what guarantees can you give them that everyone in those planes were actual criminals, terrorists, as you said?
Well, I was told that they went through a very strong vetting process, and that that will also be continuing in El Salvador. And if there's anything like that, we would certainly want to find out. But these were a bad group. This was a bad group, and they were in bad areas, and they were with a lot of other people that were absolutely killers, murderers, and people that were really bad with the worst records you've ever seen. And but we will continue that process, absolutely. We don't want to make that kind of a mistake.
Is the U.S. planning to give up the position of NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, and if so, why?
NATO is something that I saved. NATO was gone until I came along. In fact, the previous Secretary General, very good man, both of them are good. The current man is fantastic. But both of them have said, if it wasn't for Trump, you wouldn't even have a NATO, because we were paying the cost of almost all of the countries. And now they're paying. I said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to continue. You hurt us on trade. You do bad things on trade. And then on top of it, we're supposed to pay for your military. And because of what I did, hundreds of billions of dollars flowed into NATO by countries that just weren't paying. They were delinquent. They weren't paying their bills. So NATO is solid. They're strong. But they They have to treat us fairly. They
Are
have
we gonna
treat
give
us-
up the-
Because look, without us, NATO's not the
And we're
same
giving-
thing.
we're
And I
giving-
can tell you, I've been having very good discussions, as you know, with President Zelensky and with President Putin. And President Putin will tell you that without the United States, he wouldn't be worried. But he is worried when the United States is involved. And I have to tell you, I've dealt very well with both gentlemen, and we have, I think we have the confines of a deal. I hope we have the confines of a deal. I'm doing it for two reasons. Number one, and by far most importantly, thousands of young people, and they're not American people, they're Russian and they're Ukrainian, are being killed every week, thousands a week. And also the United States has paid, because of Biden, $350 billion on a war that should have never happened. If we had a competent president in this sitting right here, that war would have never happened. It would have absolutely never happened with me. And it didn't happen. For 4 years, it didn't happen.
Mr. President, do you think you have the authority, the power to round up people, deport them, and then you're under no obligation to a court to show the evidence against them?
Well, that's what the law says, and that's what our country needs, because we were, unfortunately, they allowed millions of people to come into our country, totally unvetted, totally unchecked. So you ought to ask, did he have the authority to allow millions of people? Did Biden have the authority to do something that's unthinkable? Have open borders where millions of people poured into our country, totally unvetted and totally unchecked, just as you would say. And many of those people were criminals. Many of them were from jails and prisons and mental institutions and gang members and drug dealers and very dangerous people. Many were murderers. We have 11,088 that we know of murderers they murdered. Of that number, at least half killed more than one person. They're in our country. They're in a location near you. Biden allowed that to happen to our country. And his people that really ran the country. And the person that operated the auto pen, I think we ought to find out who that was, because I guess that was the real president. So when you ask me if we have the authority, did Biden have the authority to allow millions of people to come into our country? Many of these people hardened criminals at the top of the line who have caused tremendous damage in our country. You see them in New York City fighting with our police. I mean, literally having fist fights in the street with our police. These are tough, hard criminals. Many of them came out of jails, and not just South America, from all over the world. They came out from Africa, from the Congo. They came out from Asia. Not just South America, but many from South America. These are hard, tough criminals, and we have to get them out. And a judge sitting behind a bench someplace got a nice appointment. You can't take that away from the people that are responsible. Now, in this case, Marco Rubio has a lot of big decisions to make, and he's a fantastic person, a great man. I think he'll be our best. I think he has a chance to be our best Secretary of State. He's been doing incredibly. He works so hard. He's gone to so many different countries already, and he's got the authority to get bad people out of our country. And you can't stop that with a judge sitting behind a bench that has no idea what goes on, who happens to be a radical left lunatic.
Do you think the judiciary is
You guys today are denying this New York Times report that Elon Musk was going to be shown a 20 to 30 page presentation about a theoretical war plan against China. Why not just show it to Elon?
Because I don't want to show it to anybody. You know, you're talking about a potential war with China. Now, I deal with these people all the time, and I'm dealing with Pete. I'm dealing with these gentlemen on numerous different airplane purchases, and I think they're all going to be great. But I don't want other people anybody seeing potential war with China. We don't want to have a potential war with China, but I can tell you if we did, we're very well equipped to handle it. But I don't want to show that to anybody. But certainly you wouldn't show it to a businessman who is helping us so much. He's a great patriot. He's paying a big price for helping us cut costs, and he's doing a great job. He's finding tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse. But I certainly wouldn't want, Elon has businesses in China, and he would be susceptible perhaps to that. But it was such a fake story. The New York Times is just as fake as CNN and MSDNC. And anybody read that story, people laughed at that story. Who would do such a thing? And the first thing I did is I called Susie and I called Pete. I said, is there any truth to that? And they said, it's ridiculous. No, he's over there to talk about cost. You might want to address that, Pete, but Elon was over there today to address cost. Doge, thing called Doge, which you've heard about. Pete?
That's exactly right, Mr. President. You pointed out it was a fake story. We pointed out it was meant to sort of undermine whatever relationship the Pentagon has with Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a patriot. Elon Musk is an innovator. Elon Musk provides a lot of capabilities our government and our military rely on, and I'm grateful for that. We welcomed him today to the Pentagon to talk about Doge, to talk about efficiencies, to talk about innovations. It was a great informal conversation. The rest of that reporting was fake. There was no war plans. There was no Chinese war plans. There was no secret plans. That's not what we were doing at the Pentagon.
I might add that I think Elon, if they ever wanted to do that, I think Elon wouldn't do it. I think he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't want to put himself in that position. But if you read what's out of the New York Times, it's such a dishonest newspaper. It's such garbage. It's, you know, it used to be called all the news that's fit to print. Well, it's all the news that's not fit to print. They have fake sources, or they don't have sources. I think they make most of it up. But this was a made-up story by the New York Times. I call it the failing. It's a failing newspaper. It's failing. And they shouldn't do that. They really are the enemy of the people.
And something else.
We do need honest journalism in this. You know, we've made such big strides over the last 2 months, but we just need honest journalism, and we don't have it. When you have a CNN, you have to watch these people every once in a while just to see where they're coming from, and it's so dishonest. MSNBC is, I think, probably worse, and they're both doing horribly in the ratings. I think they're going to be turned off. I don't think, they're not doing any ratings. You're doing well in the ratings.
Thank you.
Chinese counterpart next week.
Yes.
Is there anything that they can do to stop April 2nd or to roll back the tariffs that you put on China already?
Well, we can talk, but basically, I call April 2nd. I would have made it April 1st, but I didn't want to be April Fool's Day because then nobody would believe what I said, and they do believe me. April 2nd is going to be Liberation Day for America. We've been ripped off by every country in the world, friend and foe. We've been ripped off on trade. We've been ripped off on military. We protect people, and they don't do anything for us. It's just so unfair for years and years. And now some of that money is going to be coming back to us in the form of tariffs. I mean, tens of billions. It's going to be numbers like nobody's ever seen. So NVIDIA announced today, you saw that, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. The biggest chip maker in the world announced hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. Hundreds of billions, not millions, but billions. They're all coming here. Apple just announced $500 billion worth. They're going to build plants here. You know, they built their plants in China. They're going to build them here. And they're starting immediately. We have investment, the likes of which this country has never seen, already announced. And they all want to have news conferences. I don't have enough time to have that many news conferences, but I would say so far at least $4 trillion. $4 trillion is coming in. Car companies, very importantly, a lot of the car companies that were going to build in Mexico or Canada are now building here, because I don't want cars from Canada. I don't want cars from Mexico. They want to do it, it's fine, but I want the car companies to build here, not... You know, they were building in Mexico 3 plants, big plants, really big plants, and they were going to sell the cars right across the border. We wouldn't have the jobs, we wouldn't have the profits, we wouldn't get the taxes, we get nothing. All we get is unemployment and empty factories. Those days are over. So now those 3 places are going to build here, but many more than that. We have a big one. Honda is building, just announced a really big plant in Indiana, great state, smart place to build. And we have many car companies coming here. The steel mills are going to be booming, And many other things, you know, many other things come with that. But we need that for defense. You know, there are certain things you have to have. You have to have steel. We would have had, if I didn't do in my first term tariffs to stop the onslaught, because they were dumping steel in order to destroy our steel plants. If I didn't do 50% and even 100% in certain cases tariffs on steel, you wouldn't have a steel plant in the United States. And Biden was unable to get rid of those tariffs because they threw off so much money that his numbers, which didn't work anyway, because his numbers were terrible. What he did, the way he spent money was so horrible. and what he allowed to happen to energy. That's the other thing. Energy is going to be like it's never been before. Mr. Vice President is here. If you have any, do you have anything to say while you're here? He's a very good Vice President.
I'm just here to watch the show, sir.
Okay.
I think airplanes are pretty cool, so I want to go check this out.
It is cool.
Mr. President, I think you should take off the trade war at this point, though.
Well, I'll be speaking to President Xi. I have a great relationship with him. We're going to have a very good relationship. But we have a $1 trillion deficit because of Biden with President Xi. More than that. I mean, I've heard $1.2 trillion. We have a deficit. And I've explained that to President Xi. We also have a problem where he's allowing fentanyl to be sent into Mexico and then cross the border and, you know, killing. I think the number is much higher than the 125, 115 that I think it's closer to 300,000 people a year. And so that's a problem. But they have a tremendous surplus against the United States, so we don't want that.
Mr. President, a number of ministries have come to you asking for exemptions on tariffs. Is that something that is under consideration by you?
Well, people are coming to me and talking about tariffs, and a lot of people are asking me if they could have exceptions. And once you do that for one, you have to do that for all. So, I mean, generally, I did something interestingly during 2 weeks ago. I gave the American car companies a break because it would have been unfair if I didn't. And everybody said, oh, he changed his mind on tariffs. I didn't change my mind. I helped our, you know, sort of big three, big four. I helped some of the American companies. And instead of taking it properly, they said, oh, he changed it. I don't change, but the word flexibility is an important word. Sometimes there's flexibility, so there'll be flexibility. But basically, it's reciprocal. So that if China's charging us 50% or 30% or 20%, and I don't mean China, I mean anybody, any country, Canada. Nobody knows that Canada's charging our dairy farmers. They have 270% tariffs. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. They have up to 400%. They have a couple of tariffs at 400%. Nobody knows that. Nobody talks about that. And remember, with Canada, we don't need their cars, we don't need their lumber, we don't need their energy, we don't need anything from Canada, and yet it costs us $200 billion a year in subsidy to keep Canada afloat. So when I say they should be a state, I mean that. I really mean that, because we can't be expected to carry a country that is right next to us on our border. It would be a great state. It would be a cherished state. The taxes for Canadian citizens would go down in less than half. They don't spend money on military because they think we're going to protect them. There are many things that they do, like icebreakers. They want us to provide icebreakers for them. Oh, that's wonderful. So the Canada, they're very tough traders too. I want to just tell you, of all the people, they're tough traders. They trade very tough. And, you know, the expression I use is, some people don't have the cards. I used that expression about a week and a half ago, right? Somebody was negotiating who didn't have the cards, who's now, I think, saying that he wants to do it, and I think we're going to have a big deal on that very special something. We got to make a deal on that. But Canada has been a very nasty negotiator against the United States, took advantage of the United States for a long time. But nobody knows that they were getting 270% tariffs on dairy products.
Mr. President, I don't think I've heard you say this in all of the talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. Are you concerned that if they became the 51st state, they would be a very, very blue state? Very, very big and very, very blue.
No, there might be, but it would, you know, you have that artificial line that goes, that straight artificial, that looked like it was drawn by a ruler, somebody with a, I don't mean a ruler like a king, I mean like a ruler, this way. And it's just an artificial line that was drawn in the sand or in the ice. And you know, can I tell you, Peter, just, you add that to this country, what a beautiful landmass, the most beautiful landmass anywhere in the world. And it was just cut off for whatever reason. It would be great. Now, is it liberal? Maybe, but you know, a conservative until I got involved, because I don't care who wins up there. I frankly probably would do better with the liberal than the conservative, if you want to know the truth. But just a little while ago, before I got involved and totally changed the election, which I don't care about, Probably it's to our advantage, actually. But the conservative was leading against, I call him Governor Trudeau. The conservative was leading by 35 points. So, so I don't know about that. I think Canada is a place like a lot of other places. If you have a good candidate, the candidate's going to win.
And I don't know if you've seen this, but the two astronauts that you just helped save from space, they didn't get any overtime pay for all that extra time. They got $5 a day per diem. For 286 days, that is $1,430 in extra pay. Is there anything the administration can do to get them, to make them whole?
Well, nobody's ever mentioned this to me. If I have to, I'll pay it out of my own pocket, okay? I'll get it for them. I'll take care of that. I like that. I think I'll pay it right out of my, is that all? That's not a lot for what they had to go through. And I want to thank Elon Musk, by the way, because think if we don't have him. There's only so long, even though they're in the capsule up there, that the body starts to deteriorate after 9 or 10 months and gets really bad after 14, 15 months with the bones and the blood and all the things that you've been reporting on very well. And if we don't have Elon, they could be up there a long time. Who else is going to get him? And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him. And these people are going to be caught, and they're going to be caught, and they're going to be prosecuted. And from what they tell me, I see this just by watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right now.
And you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Aragua guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. When I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists. You didn't have that on January 6th, I can tell you. You didn't have anything like that on January 6th, which is sort of amazing because on January 6th, the Democrats were talking. Nobody was killed other than a very beautiful young woman, Ashley Babbitt. Nobody was killed. And you look at what's going on now with these terrorists. These are terrorists, and that's an organized event. Take a look at their signs. Take a look. They're all made by the same sign company, a nice expensive job. Now, these are, the people that finance it are, in my opinion, in just as big a trouble as the people that are setting the match and setting the fires. So we'll see. It's under very serious investigation by the FBI and by the Justice Department. These people are terrorists. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, behind you, please.
Mr. President, what do you say to American military families who are seeing Elon Musk at the Pentagon today, are hearing about Defense Department cuts, and their thoughts are immediately going to the safety of their loved ones who are currently deployed?
Well, we're making our country strong. And when they see a thing like that and they hear that story about Elon and China, what they should do is realize that the New York Times is a corrupt institution, because I think they're the ones. They knew that story wasn't true. Nobody believed that story. People that, when I first called, they laughed when they heard this story. Nobody believed it, that the Pentagon was giving him a briefing on what war with China would look like, and he has business. No, they made that up because it's a good story to make up. They're very dishonest people. Look, I have it with the Times, and you'll see more and more of it. To me, it's a very dishonest organization. But a story like that is made up. It's total fiction. And I just wanted to make sure. I called up Chief of Staff and I called up Pete. And I said, is there any truth to that? Absolutely not. He's there for Doge, not there for China. And if you ever mention China, I think he'd walk out of the room. He wouldn't take it anyway. So it's just a made-up story. Nobody's taken better care of the military. One of the things that I know that Pete's doing is he's talking about a lot of the civilian staff, and we're going to get them other jobs. We're going to have a lot of jobs in this country, but we don't want to have wasteful jobs. We want to have meaningful jobs. And those were wasteful jobs. Those are jobs that not only military, but jobs where people don't show up. We had, You take a look at Department of Education. I've never seen so many buildings with the names on it. You go past one after another Department of Education, and they're empty. The people don't show up. You know why? Because they have other jobs, because they're playing golf, or they're playing something, they're doing something. And we have a lot of great people, but we have to move that back to the States. We're gonna make our country strong, and we're gonna get people much better jobs, because we have companies moving into our country, the likes of which we've never seen before. Nothing like this has happened. And it's automatic. They don't want to pay the tariffs. How do you avoid paying the tariffs? You build your plant in the United States, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I see it. So far, I would say $4 trillion. Nobody's ever heard of them. No country's ever heard of numbers like that. $4 trillion, and those are the best ones. The biggest, best chip maker in the world. I'm not a fan of the CHIP Act, where you give billions of dollars away to companies that don't need it, and it won't bring them here. I'm giving nothing away. All they're doing is coming here, they're building because they want to avoid. Remember this on the tariffs too, because that's going to be, Liberation Day, April 2nd. It's reciprocal. If they charge us, we charge them. So somebody say, well, how much are the tariffs? Very fair. If India, as an example, has been very bad to us on tariffs, they charge 100%, 200%, whatever they charge. Now, Europe just announced they're lowering the tariffs on cars. We charge like a joke, 2.5%. That's what this country charges. Europe just announced that they're reducing their tariffs on cars to 2.5%. It's nice. But they also have non-monetary tariffs where they make it impossible for the cars to get in even without the dollars on them and the dollar signs. It's called a non-monetary tariff, where they put on controls where no matter what happens, because they don't want cars, they don't want the American car in their market. And yet they send us millions of cars. They send us big agriculture. They don't want our agriculture. They don't want anything from us. European Union's very tough. But now it's fair. So whatever they do to us, we do to them.
Mr. President,
Russia continues to attack Ukraine. Are you planning to impose any sort of
Well,
sanctions?
they're fighting against each other. Yeah, I think we're going to have a ceasefire on a lot of areas, and so far that's all held very well. And getting that ceasefire, they had a lot of guns pointing at each other. You had some soldiers, unfortunately, surrounded by other soldiers, and they are going to be, I believe we're going to pretty soon have a full ceasefire, and then we're going to have a contract. And the contract's being negotiated, the contract in terms of dividing up the lands, et cetera, it's being negotiated as we speak.
What do you say to critics who say that your actions towards law firms amount to coercion?
Well, the law firms all want to make deals. You mean the law firms that we're going after, that went after me for 4 years, ruthlessly, violently, illegally? You mean, are those the law firms you're talking about? They're not babies. They're very sophisticated people. Those law firms did bad things, They went after me for years. Russia hoax. All a hoax. It was a hoax. It was Hunter Biden's laptop. It didn't come out of Russia, by the way. It was came out of his bedroom. It was all a hoax, developed by Democrats. Hillary, I don't think Biden did, because I don't think Biden knows what the hell he's doing, frankly, based on everything I see. I've seen things since being here that are so sad, what he's done to this country, what he and they did to this country, those people that surrounded him, who, by the way, are radical left but smart. He's not smart. He was never smart. But these are radical left, smart people. They totally controlled him. He did whatever they told him to do. And it's a shame. It's so sad to see what happened, what they've done to this country, both not only the inflation you saw, but allowing millions and millions of criminals into our country. That's an inexcusable act. And many other things besides that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
There you have it from President Trump in the Oval Office alongside his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, among others, making news today on a major defense contract. Of course, that was a conversation that veered into multiple targets, and Bloomberg News has no evidence to support the idea that Joe Biden was being controlled by other people. Here we are today on the 21st of March, the Friday edition of Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Glad you're with us on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite radio channel 121, and on YouTube, where you can dial us up right now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. Maybe you're already on YouTube watching the president in the Oval Office. It's not often we get a live feed out of the Oval, the president behind the Resolute desk. And I'm joined right now in Washington by our White House correspondent, Tyler Kendall, who's been watching and listening along here. Tyler, we knew that this contract was in the works, but a major win today for a company that's had some pretty tough challenges over the past year. In fact, there's some that the president himself has talked about. When you think of the astronauts who were left at the ISS, of course, the door jam blowout that you covered extensively, and now the way forward here on the next generation fighter.
Yeah, and of course, what President Trump has also said about how he would like to see some improvements to Air Force One and looking at Boeing's timeline there. Yes, to add that to the list. Now, important developments today. Boeing beating out Lockheed Martin here. We're seeing the stocks move off of this. Bloomberg News reporting that the Air Force has actually allocated $20 billion for the research and development around this project. This was a 2-year bidding process for these companies for the full-scale development of fighter jets that are intended to fly in tandem with drones.
Yeah,
that is the key development here. It's something that you heard President Trump tout say that is going to be ushering us forward when it comes to this next generation. Not a lot is known about this classified program that this development is going to be part of. Bloomberg News reporting that the intention, though, is to replace Lockheed Martin's F-22 Raptor stealth jets.
Yep.
So that's going to be a key part of this. The goal, though, ultimately to have these jets in the air operational by the 2030s.
The F-22 is a pretty remarkable aircraft. To think that this could outperform the Raptor is kind of amazing, and I suspect it appears to defy gravity, kind of like the F-22 does. It's the F-47, is that right? Or I guess the X-47 in the experimental phase. Is that some sort of nod to President 47 for real?
Well, considering he said that the development is going to be during this term and is intended to advance some of this administration's goals, particularly when it comes to competition with China. You heard President Trump there in particular. I pulled out one of the quotes. He said it's to ensure that the U.S. continues to dominate the sky. He also said that our allies are already keenly interested in potentially purchasing some of these jets.
And it'll be really expensive, I'm sure. We don't have a price tag on it yet. And to your point, we don't have a lot of details on this classified program, but it also brings us into a wider conversation, and it's one that you've been having with the Pentagon. The idea that investing in old, big weapons systems might not be in line with our priorities now. And you talk about use of unmanned drones, cyber warfare, and we're busy working on what some people see as Cold War era programs. The whole procurement at the Pentagon is being rethought right now.
Right, and just to that latter point, Elon Musk, one of those people, actually, we've previously heard him come out talking about why would there be a need for manned aircrafts when we've seen such development when it comes to the drones. I pulled one statistic for you. The defense industrial base has consolidated by 40% in the last 10 years. That is how prominent the defense primes are in this space. Now, you spoke about some of my reporting there. I did have the chance to catch up with the Army Chief of Staff a few months ago, who said that he's trying to redo the acquisition process because oftentimes we see contracts like this that are for those long periods of time, multi-billion-dollar contracts, but by the time they actually get the weapons out the door, the weaponry could be obsolete. So they're trying to invite in some of these smaller companies so that they can also contribute to this process. Those drone companies, Anduril's one that comes to mind that's won some recent contracts with the Army in particular as they try to redo this acquisition process. But we should note it's a promise that has long been from the Pentagon, and hard to see. There's a lot of bureaucracy that they do have to get through, and obviously there's still this importance for these longer-term contracts that we saw today.
So before you leave us and head back to the White House, Tyler, I want to ask you about this whole situation with Elon at the Pentagon. We just heard the president acknowledge it, Secretary of Defense. The president's very upset. The blowback on this New York Times story was severe overnight. I'm still trying to figure out why, but they really want people to understand that Elon Musk did not receive a classified briefing on war with China. Is that Fair to say?
It seems that
At least
really,
according to the administration.
according to the administration, it seemed to kind of hit a nerve here, right? We saw many senior administration officials coming out. President Trump posting on Truth Social early this morning, replying to this story. Elon Musk, of course, a key figure. Even in this conversation today, I mentioned his previous comments about unmanned versus manned aircrafts, but then also there were questions about budget constraints for this program as DOGE looks at the Department of Defense. We had Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth yesterday signing an order directing the Pentagon to cut $580 million worth of programs. Of course, that pales in comparison to the numbers we're talking about for this program, but it does bring the DoD's total cost cutting to $800 million so far this year.
Important to remember, SpaceX is not only working for NASA, but is one of the most important defense contractors, which is why this raised some eyebrows. Tyler, thank you so much. Tyler Kendall, Bloomberg White House correspondent here. As we get things rolling on a Friday, Boeing is the winner, and the stocks are moving, by the way. We just watched Lockheed Martin fall out of bed a bit. Boeing is rallying on this news, and we should update the markets overall here. The Friday trade, it's been a little choppy. Charlie Pellet joins us from World Headquarters in New York with the latest on the markets. Charlie?
Hi, thank you very much, Joe Matthew. Happy Friday, on track for another down week, but a lot of developing stories, a lot of headlines. Want to bring you up to date on the situation at London Heathrow Airport. Certainly affects people here in the United States, people trying to get in and out of Heathrow back to the U.S. But right now, the headline on the Bloomberg Professional Service, London Heathrow is going to resume some flights later today. Heathrow says it is now able to safely restart flights after that massive power outage. Full operation is expected tomorrow. So the headline right now, London Heathrow to resume some flights later today. As we have been reporting, as you just heard here on Bloomberg, Boeing beats Lockheed for the next generation U.S. fighter jet contract. Boeing shares, as Joe mentioned, they're up 4.3%. Lockheed Martin down now by 6.8%. Major story involving trade, with France saying it wants the European Union to consider deploying its most powerful retaliatory measure against the U.S. for the first time if President Trump uses tariffs to unfairly force the bloc into policy changes. And finally, a development involving measles, as the U.S. reports 77 more measles cases in the past week, with a total now at 378. Your markets, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all in the red. S&P right now down 17, down 0.3. The Dow lower by 111, down 0.3%. We've got NASDAQ down 13, drop there of just about 0.1%. We are well off session lows. 10-year 4.24%, the 2-year 3.93%. Gold down $29 the ounce at $3,015. The precious metal now at with a loss of 1%. Crude up by about 0.3%, $68.24 a barrel, and Bitcoin down now by 0.7%, 83,907 on Bitcoin. So again, repeating the headline out of London, Heathrow will resume some operations later today. I'm Charlie Pellet. Back we go to Washington, and once again, your host, here he is, Joe Matthew.
Thanks for the update. Charlie Pellet, of course, the voice of Wall Street and the New York subway, with us from New York. It's not just the markets, right? Charlie does everything. He's the Swiss Army knife of radio, updating the headlines that keep us posted. We've got our eyes on Heathrow, and thank you for that, Charlie. Thank you for being with us on the Friday edition of Balance of Power. You made it to the threshold of the weekend, and we do have news from the White House as we walked you into the Oval Office at the top of the hour here. Boeing is the winner to create the next generation fighter jet here in the U.S., beating out Lockheed. It's moving stocks, and it's part of the narrative today in Washington, D.C. The Pentagon is, in our view, I guess, for a number of reasons. As you might have also heard, the president and the Secretary of Defense talking about Elon Musk. And the story today in the New York Times that got everybody upset overnight. Elon Musk brought to the Pentagon for a briefing this morning, knowing, of course, he's one of the biggest and most important defense contractors with SpaceX, knowing as well that he is behind the DOGE effort to bring some pretty heavy-duty cost-cutting. At least he wants to see that to the Pentagon. The defense hawks don't. And as I said, the blowback was something else. The New York Times says Pentagon scheduled to brief Elon Musk, get this, on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China. The antennas went up at the White House. Time says briefing includes 20 to 30 slides outlining how the U.S. military would fight China. The plan, beginning with the indications and warning of a threat from China to various options on what Chinese targets to hit, over what time period. what would be presented to President Trump for wartime decisions, knowing as well that Elon Musk does a lot of business in China with Tesla. So the tentacles are far and wide here in this story. And as I said, the White House wasn't having any of it. This is 100% fake news, Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell. How disgraceful it is, President Trump said, that discredited media can make up such lies. The fake news delivers again, said Pete Hegseth. And the narrative just continued there in the Oval Office. The president saying they knew the story wasn't true, talking about the New York Times. Nobody believed that story. People want to explore. They laughed when they heard the story, he said. Nobody believed the Pentagon was giving him a briefing on what war with China would look like. And we could talk about a lot of things involving Elon Musk, and that's where we start with Lisa Camuso Miller, the former RNC Communications Director, Republican strategist, with us right now on Bloomberg. Lisa, I missed you. It's great to have you back. You're no stranger to the Pentagon and the defense contracting business here. Does Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, the CEO of Tesla, and the leader of the Doge have business in that building?
Well, not if he doesn't have a security clearance, and not if he's not Senate confirmed, he ought not to. But, you know, Joe, it's really hard to know what to believe, right, as it relates to this. But I will say that, let me tie the two stories together for you. It was Elon Musk that said that F-35 was a gigantic loss leader for the U.S. government, that over and over again we had overspent on technology that was not delivered. Mm-hmm. And so today's news about Boeing should be no surprise, because Boeing overall is the better choice for this delivery of this brand new and very sophisticated product in NGAD. So this is remarkable work, and remarkable in that it's not a surprise, because it was Donald Trump that said in his first administration, that he was really impressed by the F-35 because of the technology, and impressed by all of the facets of what the F-35 promised. But the F-35 has been a tremendous loss leader. And so, do I know what Elon Musk was talking about with the Pentagon today? No, I have no idea. And do I believe anybody's protest? Because it sounds like everyone's protesting about it. I suspect that probably caused a big headache in the White House today. But I also know that the president is very excited. It sounds like he's so excited that he's calling it the F-47.
Yeah, what do you think about that? I guess they call it the Trump jet or something. It's the F-47. The stocks are moving. You talk about Boeing. It's back above 180 here. It's up 5%. Lockheed's moving in the other direction. It's down over $30 a share, about 7%. I just want to make sure I understand, because Elon Musk does not like the F-35 program. This went to Boeing, and if that's the case, we've heard Donald Trump make fun of Boeing, criticize Boeing for months and months, since the door blowout in the jet, right up until recently when Boeing had trouble getting the astronauts home. Never mind this whole flap over Air Force One. So does Elon make the call?
I'm not sure that Elon makes the call, but I certainly think that the fact that Doge and Elon Musk took a look at the F-35 and said, that's a product that we should take a look at, and we should look for something that's more sophisticated and perhaps one that could be delivered closer to on time. I do think it had some impact in the final decision. And look, the president, he doesn't pick winners and losers, in that he picks on everybody, the president. And so the fact that Boeing was the recipient of some criticism, so has every other U.S. company.
So don't read into it. What do you make of the Tesla vandalism? I don't mean to bob around too much on you here, but I feel like there's a big connection with the outrage over him at the Pentagon today to this video. Did you see the video of these Teslas on fire in Las Vegas? Physical attacks on Tesla cars and dealerships are going up. We're seeing Molotov cocktails thrown at cars. You've got Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who was, of course, the Democratic running mate, telling people is celebrating the stock going down, telling them to remove the Tesla logos from their cars. You ever seen anything like this?
I mean, I've never seen anything like any of what we've seen over the course of the last 2 months, Joe. But do I think that it's real? I mean, it was Elon Musk who was saying on podcasts before the election was decided that if Donald Trump wasn't elected, that he was done for. What I don't think he expected was that this kind of backlash would be coming for him.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. Of course, we didn't have a sense of what the Doge was even going to be at that point, and that's really what has people upset here, correct? Like, you can talk about the salutes and all the weird stuff and the chainsaw, but it's the Doge cuts and it's the way that employees have been fired that have changed sentiment here, right?
Without question. And Joe, the other thing too is that it's a contrast between two narratives that imply that we are trying to get back to a more lean and smart and efficient government, when in the same breath we're hearing about awards being given to Elon Musk for more work, right? So taking money out of the pockets of Americans' federal workers, putting them out on the street, and putting more resources into the pocket of a guy who's not even Senate confirmed or an actual, government employee himself. So there's so much contrast here that, do I think that it's his brand that's going to take the greatest hit? It seems like the most easy opportunity for the American people to speak up and out over how unhappy they are with Elon Musk and control in the government.
Well, that's a pretty brutal world if you're somebody working at Tesla and, putting your life's work into designing these cars, which are pretty cool if you remove the politics from the whole equation here. We've seen polls like this, and I know that you've been in this business long enough as well, Lisa, where you see politics layered over branding and say, okay, liberals prefer Pacifico beer, conservatives like Miller Lite, neither of them are drinking whatever this, but we actually project our politics often on our brand decisions, not in a hyper-partisan way. This is the most extreme form of this we've ever seen. What does it tell us about the state we are in the country here? And will there be like a liberal version of Tesla that is the blue alternative for electric cars?
Perhaps. There's also been a backlash against electric cars from the administration, right? There's been this pullback on whether or not people and car owners would get the benefit of the tax break that they would get for buying an electric car. But Elon didn't care because it wasn't going to affect him in his own calculation, at least from the news reports that I've read. So, but Joe, there are apps and there are resources all across the country now that give people a sense of where they should be spending their dollars, because spending their dollars can in fact let not the government, but let the private sector know how they feel about the policies that they stand for. I've certainly seen people make decisions about their Prime memberships with Amazon and their decisions about where to shop. So there is a lot of American dollars in the consumer space that are being spent more smartly and spent more wisely in a way that they're demonstrating their political voice, not just at the polls, but in the regular everyday shopping behaviors of the American people.
These are some stark images you guys are showing on YouTube here. This is from Seattle, the aftermath of these Teslas being burned up. I don't know where you go from here. Just in our final moment, Lisa Camuso Miller, we're going to end up having corporations have to hire political strategists like you to know how to advertise then, right?
Well, yeah, in the advertising, also how they position themselves in their messaging and the words that they use as they demonstrate how they feel about particular issues. It's for the first time that I can remember in the near term that every single word that comes out of the mouth, whether it's advertising, press statements, or otherwise, have got to go through a very specific filter to make sure that there isn't a backlash and to make sure that isn't affecting the consumer behavior as it relates to brands in the United States.
All right, let me know when the first major retailer reaches you to have this conversation, because I think this is kind of a big deal. Lisa, great to see you. Have a great weekend, of course, and come see us soon. Typically on our panel, but we thought we'd take a deep dive and pick the brain of Lisa Camuso Miller, former RNC Comms Director, Republican strategist, and we'll assemble our panel next. They're back together today. Rick and Jeannie are on the way, right here on Bloomberg.
It's 12:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pelletan. Some of the stories that we're following for you. Do want to begin with what is happening at Heathrow Airport in London. Bringing you up to date there, Heathrow now says it will resume some flights later today. Also, just getting word that FCC Chairman Brendan Carr says the Federal Communications Commission is prepared to block mergers and acquisitions proposals from some companies that promote what he calls invidious DEI policies. U.S. stocks are lower. We are off session lows, but still the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all in the red right now. We are seeing a rebound in several mega caps that is pushing stocks away from session lows, but disappointing outlooks from bellwethers across various industries are spurring caution about how corporate America will cope with an economic slowdown. Right now we got the S&P 500 index down 18, down by just about 0.3%. The Dow now down 73, a decline there of 0.2%, and NASDAQ lower by 9. NASDAQ was positive briefly a few minutes ago. Right now down less than 0.1%. 10-year 4.24% with the 2-year 3.93%. Gold now down $31 the ounce, down 1%. 3,013 on the precious metal, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.2%, 68.22 a barrel. Bitcoin down 0.8%, 83,857. There is solid evidence that U.S. tariff threats and White House hyperbole are whacking Canada's economy. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Canadians are paring back. Fresh numbers from Ottawa show retail sales dropped for a second month in February, the first back-to-back decline since mid-2023. In volume terms, Canadian retail sales posted a steep drop as well. Meantime, industry data show Canadian small business optimism collapsed to a 25-year low. Last week, the Bank of Canada cut interest rates again to counter the U.S. economic warfare. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
And minutes ago here on Balance of Power, we were talking about Tesla. The stock now higher by 4.1% as Elon Musk seeks to reassure Tesla employees during what he called a little bit of stormy weather after the car maker's shares plunged more than 50% in just 3 months. Musk did hold an all-hands meeting with employees again. Tesla right now up by 4%. Back we go to Washington. Balance of Power continues. Once again, your host here is Joe Matthew.
All right, the full treatment from Charlie Pellet. Thank you, sir. Great to have you with us, as always, Charlie, on the Friday edition of Balance of Power. Here on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite, you know, we're always there on XM Satellite Radio, channel 121. Runs right through the day. Kind of like our YouTube feed. Starts early in the morning with Tom Keene, straight through the late edition of Balance of Power. Get on YouTube, search Bloomberg Business News Live. This is the best pro tip I have for you on this Friday, okay? You get the live feed, you get the radio show, you get the video here in the studio. We'll keep you posted on everything while we have it. This is 100% fake news, according to the chief Pentagon spokesman, Sean Parnell. The defense secretary says the fake news delivers again. Donald Trump. China will not even be mentioned or discussed. How disgraceful that the discredited media can make up such lies. Echoed again there in the Oval Office. They're all talking about Elon Musk. And boy, the New York Times started a fire with this story last night. At the head of the Doge, if we can call him that. And, well, as it turns out, the head of a pretty important defense contractor named SpaceX, incidentally also runs Tesla, had a special appointment this morning at the Pentagon to be briefed on China war plans. This is what the New York Times wrote. This is when things started to get chippy. At the White House, everybody starts kicking out denials and fake news statements. Times said the briefing includes slides outlining how the U.S. military would fight China, the options presented to President Trump. He actually went to the Pentagon this morning. He was there. They claim, however, he was not briefed on China. But it's raising a lot of new questions about Elon Musk. Politico this morning out with the column, "We've reached peak Elon." I kind of doubt it. But Democratic calls for his confirmation in the Senate are starting to grow louder again as people wonder exactly how much information he should be exposed to and how many decisions when it comes to procurement at the Pentagon he should be able to make. By the way, we know, as we just discussed with Lisa Camuso Miller, he was not a fan of the F-35 project, called it a lost leader. Lockheed Martin, look at that stock today, because Lockheed was not selected to build the new fighter jet, the next generation fighter, the F-47. Boeing shares right now up 5%, Lockheed down 7% as we assemble our signature panel. You know it's Friday when Rick and Jeannie are back together. Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist, and Jeannie Shanzano, our Democratic analyst, senior democracy fellow with the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. Rick, you're no stranger to the defense industry and the conversation that we're having here. This is, of course, a project that a lot of defense hawks thought we were behind on, getting a next-generation fighter to keep up with or at least move beyond China. What do you make of the announcement today and the backdrop of Elon Musk?
Yeah, I think the announcement was highly anticipated. This procurement's been going on for a couple of years, so folks who follow these kinds of developments have been kind of hot in anticipation of seeing what comes out of this. And there's been a general sensibility, at least amongst the people I've spoken to, that Boeing was definitely in the front runner seat on all this. But of course, then you get all the atmospherics, and I don't know who's running Doge PR. Actually, I think it's Stephen Miller's wife in the White House. But what a day to not want to go to the Pentagon. I mean, like, his number one competitor in the space business in the Pentagon is Lockheed. I mean, SpaceX and Lockheed are direct competitors. And he decides to go to the Pentagon the morning Lockheed's going to get beat for this $20 billion contract. I mean, like, who does that? Who says that's a good idea? Look, I mean, president can have anybody he wants briefed on any topic he wants. It has nothing to do with security clearances. It has nothing to do with propriety. That's a presidential option. He can exert anytime he wants, and he gets advice from whoever he asks for it. And that's the way it should be. But, like, really, today, the day the Oval Office has a defense secretary come in and announce that you just had your top competitor beat and their stock goes through the bottom? I mean, it's just nuts.
Wow. Rick Davis puts it together, Jeannie. I don't even have to ask you a question. What do you think?
Well, I think it was exactly what Elon Musk wanted. And I think what got away from him was the report by the New York Times last night, because the report was very clear. He was going there. He was going to go in the tank. He was going to get that information on China and our war plans. And the president was obviously so angry last night when he wrote that truth, denying it. And after that, the meeting in the tank was scrapped, but he still went to the Pentagon. So I think that this is exactly the point and exactly what he wanted. But what I did think was telling about what the president said in the Oval Office today was he was very, very clear when he said Elon Musk should not have access to this kind of information. And by my count, that may be the first time we have heard Donald Trump, maybe a little bit, walk away from Elon Musk and say he should not have access to information. Now, whether he believes that or not is another question, but he said it. And so those words, I think, are words we should pay attention to, because it suggests that maybe he's reading the same polls we are, that Elon Musk may be a drain on him and his administration being this much out front.
Well, it's interesting. He's going back to a familiar playbook here from the campaign, Rick. It's all Elon all the time today, apparently. As we walk up on a very important election, it's kind of the first, it's going to get a lot of talk next week. We'll lay down a marker on this right now. Think of it as kind of the first test vote or example of an election since November here. And it's a Wisconsin Supreme Court election that we're talking about. Elon Musk, the super PAC that he founded to help Republican candidates, beginning with Donald Trump, America PAC. Rick says it's offering $100. It's not $1 million this time. $100 to registered voters in Wisconsin who sign a petition in opposition to activist judges or refer others to sign it. Spending millions to elect a conservative candidate to the Wisconsin Supreme Court here. That election is the 1st of April. Remember last time it was like a lottery. You'd sign up, get in the lottery to win $1 million. What do you make of the $100 ahead here? Elon Musk has been a busy man lately.
Yeah, it's a bounty to get information, right? So sign this, and then we've got your name, your address, your cell phone, your email, and this is what it's all about: is identifying voters who have a willingness to say yes to the profile that Brad Schimmel has, which is the Republican candidate for the Supreme Court. And then they're going to lay that over on all the data they have on voters. And it's a very smart play. There's still a lot of shrugs and scratching of the head to determine whether any of this stuff is legal. This being a state race, it doesn't have anything to do with federal election laws. It's got state election laws written all over it. And so, look, I mean, Elon has the money to do this kind of a technique. And if you're in the data business politically, this is brilliant. You're going to capture a lot of names and information.
That's fascinating. Jeannie, what do you think about this? Elon Musk is a senior advisor to the president. There's nothing illegal here, right? It's just an interesting look, spending money like this to get someone elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Yeah, not unless it violates a Wisconsin state law, and apparently at this point nobody has suggested it does. It is fascinating though. Most of us go to the ballot box, go to vote, and we see a litany of judges on the ballot, and even those of us who follow politics closely have no clue who many of these people are. But Wisconsin has become a state in which they're going to spend $100 million on a Supreme Court race. And next year, they're saying it could go up to $200 million. I mean, it's utterly astounding. And it really is a battle of the billionaires, because Elon Musk on the one side, then you look at the Democratic side, and you've got big spenders there like George Soros, the governor of Illinois. So this is a race where people are pouring money in, and Democrats are really, really trying to figure out, can they put Musk at the top of every ticket in the midterm and get out the vote that way? And so they're hoping that Wisconsin, and then when we go to the Virginia governor's race, they'll be able to test some of these messages with Elon, with his, axe and all these things he's running around with. Does it get people out? Are Democrats mad enough at Elon Musk to get out to vote in greater numbers? They have to be careful, though, because we all remember a few years ago, abortion did get Democrats out in this same race. And the following year, Donald Trump won the state. So it doesn't always work the way Democrats want.
Well, you set that up perfectly, Jeannie, and I'm wondering what your thought is, Rick. Are we already giving too much emphasis to this race as some sort of indicator as to the political temperature in the country?
Yeah, I don't think we want to get too far over our skis on the idea that this is going to be indicative of any other race but a statewide Wisconsin, Supreme Court race. That being said, there is a message being sent here, and we've heard this a lot during the confirmation process, that if you don't pull the line on what Donald Trump wants in Congress, you're going to have Elon Musk and the America's PAC and the Build America PAC on your back. And him spending $20 million here is a proof point in that when they get back to Congress and they've got a tough vote, Elon Musk says, I'm going to run people against you if you don't pull the right trigger on this vote, then he means it, because he just spent $20 million on a Wisconsin Supreme Court race. And I think that's really the message that's being sent here.
Just give you a taste of how Democrats are handling their side of the race. This is actually a piece of an ad from Wisconsin. Watch.
Attacking Social Security, cutting Medicaid and child cancer research, dismantling the Department of Education. Elon Musk is out of control. And now the power-hungry billionaire is unloading millions to buy the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
That's from Wisconsin Democrats, Jeannie. They found their boogeyman. Is it going to work? We've got 1 minute.
Yeah, they're hoping so. We won't know until we get these results out of Wisconsin, but already turnout is huge there. They say it was up like 120% last time I checked. So it may turn people out, but of course, turnout, we don't know whether that is for or against the Republicans. So we'll have to see. But Democrats are certainly hoping that this gins up turnout in a race like this and they can move that into the midterm. But again, we don't know if Elon Musk is going to be relevant by midterm time.
Yeah. Race is April 1st. We'll be talking more about it with Rick and Jeannie as we get closer. Isn't it great to have these guys back together again? And it's Friday. Second day of spring with our signature panel. They'll be back in hour 2 as we continue our conversation live from Washington here on the fastest show in politics. I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
Boeing will build America's next generation fighter jet. Welcome to the fastest show in politics. as President Trump announces the new contract straight from the Oval Office here following a year of challenges for the defense contractor here on Earth and in space. I'm Joe Matthew, alongside Julie Fine in Washington. Welcome to the Friday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Julie, it's great to have you back on board today. We're going to be exploring the decisions that went into this contract here on a day that Elon Musk shows up at the Pentagon, getting people in a tizzy at the White House based on some of the reporting we've been hearing today.
And the White House saying nothing to see here. It's all about Doge.
And fake news.
Fake news from the New York Times. That's what they said about that article. So, yeah, $20 billion contract for Boeing now to build this jet, this stealth jet. So a lot of news coming out of that news conference today.
Yeah, the Secretary of Defense was there as well. And there are a lot of questions about Elon Musk's role at the Pentagon as the leader of Doge, as also the leader of one of the biggest defense contractors out there called SpaceX, of course. And his lack of trust or his view on Lockheed Martin. He has called the F-35 program a lost leader. So there are questions about the influence he may or may not have had in this decision.
And this all coming off of him last night telling his investors also nothing to see here. Everything's just fine.
Yeah, hold on to your stock. He was talking to employees at Tesla following some of the steep declines that we've seen. By the way, this, of course, defense contractor is a stock mover today, which is why we want to get up to date on the markets.
And so we will toss that to Charlie Pellet right now, and he can tell us everything.
All right, I thank you very much. Tall order, but yes, I got you covered as we do here at Bloomberg. Boeing shares, they're advancing right now, up 5.5% on that news, but Lockheed Martin, it's going the other direction. LMT on the ticker down now by 7%. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, they're all trading mixed. But right now, we have got the S&P well off session lows, right to the numbers, down 6 now, down 0.1%. We've got the Dow lower by 12, little change there. The NASDAQ Composite Index roaring back, a rebound in several mega caps, pushing stocks away from session lows. Case in point, NASDAQ up 0.1%. The NASDAQ 100 index, full of those big tech names, however, little changed on the day, lower by 2 points. The 10-year 4.25%, the 2-year 3.95%. Gold down $29, down 1%, still above 3,015 on gold. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 68.38 a barrel. London's Heathrow Airport says it is slowly coming back from an unprecedented day-long blackout that brought travel to a standstill for hundreds of thousands of passengers at Europe's biggest airport. The airport says it will begin some flights out later today that are focused on repatriating displaced passengers and relocating aircraft. Hopes to have everything back to normal by tomorrow. In the meantime, shares of British Airways parent International Consolidated Air, it is down now. The ADR is down 2.7%. Other carriers with significant transatlantic operations based in the U.S. include American Airlines Group, down now by 0.6%. UAL, parent of United, up by 0.2%. Delta, lower by just about 0.8%. Recapping, looking at a mixed market, the Dow, the S&P lower. We've got NASDAQ higher. Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Julie Fine.
All right. Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. At World Headquarters in New York, the voice of Wall Street and the New York subway. Thanks for being with us here on the Friday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. A stock-moving day here in Washington with the announcement of this new defense contract, the Next Generation Fighter. As you just heard from Charlie, it's moving Boeing, it's moving Lockheed. This market does not smack of the golden age. However, we were promised by this White House it will take time, according to the headline on Josh Wingrove's great column. Julie Fine, we do want to dig into the decision-making here that went into this defense contract, and it really has a lot to do with the optics, like we were discussing at the beginning of the hour here. The fact that Elon Musk was at the Pentagon today, the president and the defense secretary asked by reporters about what's going on today in the White House, their attempt to frame exactly why he was there.
And their attempt to frame it was Doge. It always seems to come back to Doge when it goes to Elon Musk. So that's what they said he was there doing. Josh Wingrove, we'd like to bring you in, our senior White House correspondent. Josh, I want to talk to you about your reaction to what you saw there.
I mean, it's been an interesting morning here so far. Look, Trump reacting angrily, but also fundamentally confirming key parts of that story, which is that Elon is at DOD today. Yeah. So, you know, I guess he's just talking about cost cutting, but not about what many Trump allies view as the #1 adversary of America. So, you know, who's to say? Well, come out in the wash on that. But right now, it's a dynamic day there. But Trump is, you know, has been up and down in terms of public profile this week. You know, has over the last couple of weeks, in particular, with what we're seeing in markets. So his holding court today was the first time, and he's not doing it as often as he used to, I guess, is what I'm fumbling at.
It's been an interesting time for Elon Musk and the way the White House has tried to embrace him ever since the Teslas were lined up in the driveway there, right? You've got Howard Lutnick telling people to buy Tesla stock, the Commerce Secretary. Of course, Elon told his workers to hang on to their stock for a better day yesterday. Now you've got him over at the Pentagon and the Defense Secretary with a full-throated, as you heard in the Oval Office, defense. He said this is a great patriot and someone who is actually helping the United States of America defend itself. But you can't deny the inherent conflicts of interest here.
I mean, this has been an animating issue throughout the course of Elon's
Is
time
anything
around.
louder than this one? The CEO of SpaceX, who doesn't like Lockheed Martin, in the building at the Pentagon the day Boeing gets a major contract.
I mean, the calls that are loudest for Elon are coming from fans of his companies. I mean, we saw that in one of the stories on the terminal today. That's right. Advocates of Tesla saying that he's being pulled in too many directions. And Elon himself last night telling Tesla employees, look, I feel like I have 17 different jobs. Now, I only have one job. Joe, you feel like you have a couple. Julie, God knows how many you have. But Elon says he's got 17, and the pressure seems to be building more from that side, because if you're a Tesla evangelist, you've seen the stock come down, 50% in the last couple of months. And so you are thinking that this is just too many directions that he's being pulled into. Trump, you know, when he starts to sour on someone, signs bubble up. You know, he starts kind of riffing, and, you know, he takes the off-ramp on a tangent here and there. We haven't seen that with Elon. There's not a lot of sign that Trump is distancing himself. On the contrary, you mentioned the Tesla display on the South Lawn. Right. So I think if anything, Trump loves Elon being around.
But what's interesting about this, Josh, and we've talked about this in the past, is you do see him souring on people. You see it. You've seen it in 2016. You're seeing it now in the second term. However, there's something about Elon that gives him staying power right now that other people were not able to achieve.
Yeah, Trump likes celebrities, Trump likes fellow business people, and he thinks that there's waste and fraud in the government. One of the things I think has flown under the radar is Elon keeps backtracking on some of the savings that they're booking, right? And a lot of this is simply a savings exercise ahead of these congressional talks. They want to book savings, and they want to make the math work on the budget reconciliation package. But a lot of that is just evaporated. They post things, they take it down, they change it. They, in some cases, have overstated the savings by several times. And so right now, I think Trump is there because he thinks Elon is helping sort of break stuff that Trump wants to break. I think tension always comes in the Trump world, and I'm not saying that's happening yet, when things start breaking that Trump does not want to break. And when that happens, we'll see where it goes. We have seen elements of that, I will note, on things like staffing cuts with Trump holding cabinet meetings, say, actually, we're not going to just get rid of everyone. Don't cut with an axe. Cut with a scalpel. Keep the good people, of course, easier said than done.
We've only got about a minute left. I want to ask you about this great piece you have on the terminal and at Bloomberg.com, sharing the byline with Hadriana Lowenkron. Trump says promised U.S. golden age will take time. It gets us back to the no pain, no gain idea that the market really doesn't seem to be buying at the moment.
Yeah, I should pay tribute to Hadriana for sharing her byline with me.
Well
what a colleague we have.
That's very nice.
I know, she's doing great. It's a great story. If I can humbly say, we have been waiting to see when Trump really wraps his arms around this economy. Because if anything, that'll be a sign that he thinks that it's going in one direction, right? He has been waffling on that. And his aides have been sort of distancing themselves and say, hey, when does he own this? When is it no longer the sort of Joe Biden, what they argue is the Joe Biden sort of hangover economy? When does it become the Trump economy? And they're saying 6 to 12 months, Q3, Q4. One aide telling us, look, it depends on the policies. It'll be the Trump economy if we get our policies enacted, including if Republicans pass that tax bill. But all this is sort of, not what Trump promised on the campaign trail, right? He promised literally a miracle. He promised a golden age. And so right now the question is what are we seeing? And every president in the history of time takes credit for the economy. The difference is that the threat to the economy right now, the thing that's weighing on sentiment, is Trump's own policies. It's the tariff question hanging in the air. We'll have a lot more clarity on that on April 2nd. If it's narrower than expected, then markets will be happy. If it's wider than expected, then who knows where sentiment will go. But right now, we heard it from Jay Powell. The thing that's weighing on markets, the thing that is making Donald Trump not really want to wrap his arms around it, is, of course, Trump himself and his policies on trade.
We're going to talk to Mackenzie Eaglen in a moment from the American Enterprise Institute about this contract being awarded today. Did he come up with the F-47?
That's a great question. I was laughing to myself about that.
Are we serious? Let us know if you find out.
I mean, Space Force seemed like it was a riff, and here we have a Space Force now,
There it is.
all these years later. So
there was no F-45. I mean, we got to go back.
I mean, it could. Yeah, maybe they'll settle on that as a compromise.
Find
F-46, I think, is out though. I don't know.
Find Hadriana, how true,
Yeah.
and Josh's story on the terminal. Great to see you, Josh Wingrove.
Thanks,
Straight from the
Josh.
White House to your TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. As we do prepare to add Mackenzie Eaglen's voice to the equation, let's bring you back to the Oval Office for this important announcement today.
After a rigorous and thorough competition between some of America's top aerospace companies, the Air Force is going to be awarding the contract for the next generation air dominance platform to Boeing. As you know, it was highly competed for. There was a lot of competition.
The president, a short time ago, behind the Resolute desk as we bring in Mackenzie Eaglen, Senior Fellow, American Enterprise Institute. Mackenzie, it's great to have you with us here on what is a breaking news story. We finally got the contract, and we have a sense of the contours of this program. We even know it's called the F-47. Is this money well spent?
It's necessary money to spend. It's an expensive aircraft, but the Pentagon doesn't buy enough at scale. So when you buy very few of something, of course, it costs more money.
You know, obviously this was sought after. Why Boeing?
So Boeing, you know, they have a long history of terrific military products, albeit in some cases behind schedule and with some difficulty when they cross over to their commercial lines. But this is a program that's not joint with the Navy, but sort of in partnership with the Navy. And Boeing built the Navy's air superiority fighters, and they have a role in other different aircraft programs as well across the defense and aerospace accounts. And so it's the winner. Lockheed dropped out. It came down to Boeing and Northrop, and they were chosen for a variety of reasons that will not become public for you and I to know fully, except that it was the right combination of cost, and that meets the threats that the Pentagon is looking at.
Interesting. This is an aircraft that won't be in service until the 2030s. Mackenzie, what war is this preparing for? Is this an answer to China's next generation fighter that it recently unveiled, or at least we saw images of?
In part, but it really, so the U.S. Air Force is the only branch of any military in the world that can hold Chinese targets in mainland China at risk. If you want to continue to be able to do that, to have that unique capability on planet Earth, you have to have a new bomber, kind of shuts, you know, opens the door for the fighter to come in behind it, the air superiority fighter, and clear, you know, the air of enemy air defenses, anti-access and area denial capabilities, other long-range strike assets. So the bomber and the fighter and some space assets work together to keep that unique position in the United States of America's military. And so, and yet another reason why you need to invest in it and why it's very expensive.
What's interesting about this is President Trump said the plane will travel with drones. He said, quote, as many drones as you want. Is this a fighter jet? Is it really a platform for drones? You know, explain the concept there.
Sure. This is sort of like a loyal wingman concept. So the F-47 is a penetrating combat aircraft, but it's a part of a family. And it's also informing other Air Force acquisition guideposts for the future. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it will fly alongside hundreds of drones called the autonomous aircraft called collaborative combat aircraft. And it will also have presumably a stealth tanker capability with it. Could also be, I mean, in theory, that could also be a drone truck, a fuel drone truck next to it. So it's going to sort of be the mothership to these other loyal, autonomous, mostly, presumably, autonomous wingmen. And then there's some off-board capabilities in other parts of the system that, of course, are not in the air as well.
Well, it sounds fascinating, to be honest. To actually see this in the real world is going to be something. Mackenzie, what's next? Obviously, next generation fighter was near the top of the list here, but we've heard a lot about the rebuilding, the revamping of our Navy, the shipbuilding plans that this White House and this Pentagon has? Is that next on the list, or are we looking somewhere else?
I expect there to be a lot of investment in the United States Navy, but moving it toward the same direction the Air Force is heading, which is more autonomous, supplemental capability to sail alongside or undersea with U.S. Navy ships. Because it takes so long for these manned capabilities to come online, because we demand that. We demand exquisite systems and safety and testing and other things, since it's for the armed forces. The Navy is going to be moving in this same direction, not just with ships, but what goes on top of the ships or inside the ships, so meaning aircraft, missiles and munitions, et cetera. But I also think the Golden Dome for America will be another investment that's going to move pretty quickly with a lot of announcements this year, which we know is a priority for this White House. I'd say these are probably the three marquee baskets of investments for this year, for this administration.
If you're introducing a new billion-dollar plane, this is the era of Doge. So what do you think will be cut? What will change because of all the money going to this?
Which I think is great. Honestly, it's refreshing, frankly, to have the largest federal bureaucracy, larger than every other agency combined, shook up and having each program justify its existence, whether that's an organization, a human, or a weapon system and capability. So clearly you'll start with other so-called legacy systems that don't meet the threat profile that the Pentagon is looking at, particularly relative to China. And you'll offload those to help reinvest some of the money required for the penetrating combat aircraft program, the F-47. But beyond that, you're going to also try and streamline, well, you're going to want to move ahead, with the stealth tanker. That program has been challenged as well. The Air Force has had a lot of acquisition challenges the last 20 years. So it's important to get the Air Force in sort of a good place, a healthy place with spending. But then I expect other streamlining of other organizations and commands and units and people, because really those are the most expensive things the Air Force buys. It's not aircraft, it's bases, places, and people and services. So you'll see a corresponding reduction, I think, in force structure alongside of the investment in this program.
Mackenzie, we've only got a minute left here. Watching Boeing shares rise over 5% at the moment. From the investment standpoint, are these old line, massive defense contractors still sound investments? Do they have the growth potential that they used to have up against many smaller private companies making drones, making software, reinventing defense?
It depends. If the pie grows, it's big enough to broaden the industrial base and strengthen the traditional industrial base. Although I expect at the end of this presidential administration, there may be one fewer. But otherwise, there's a lot of partnership going on between and among them behind the scenes. But there is room for new entrant and disruption. The primes do something that the other companies haven't yet shown that they can do. When they can do it, then maybe.
It's great to have you with us. From the American Enterprise Institute, Mackenzie Eaglin, on this day, Boeing lands the big next-generation fighter contract. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Julie Fine in Washington. This is Bloomberg.
on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pellet. We are off session lows. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, however, all do remain in the red right now, looking at a 16-point loss on the S&P 500 index. The S&P down by about 0.3%. Dow Industrials trading lower by 48 points now, down 0.1%. NASDAQ Composite Index also down 0.1%. NASDAQ lower by 16. We've got the 10-year yielding 4.24%, with the 2-year 3.94%. Spot gold down $28 the ounce, $3,016. That is a drop of 0.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.4%, $68.34 the ounce. And Bitcoin now down by 0.7%, 83,939 on Bitcoin. Bottom line here, a rebound in several mega cap stocks, pushing us away from session lows. JP Morgan Chase is changing the name of its Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program at a time when DEI has been attacked by President Trump's administration. The largest American bank will now call the initiative Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion, or DOI, that word from Chief Operating Officer Jen Piepsack in a memo to staff. JP Morgan Chase shares, they're up right now by 1%. So again, recapping, stocks lower, S&P down 0.2%. Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington, the Friday edition. We say it every week. What a week it has been. Back we go to Joe Matthew and also Julie Fine.
All right, Charlie, great to have you on board every Friday, every day here on Balance of Power. We do this every weekday from Washington on Bloomberg TV, radio, and on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you along. 100% fake news. That is how the Pentagon spokesman described the Times story this morning, New York Times, suggesting Elon Musk would be in the Pentagon today receiving a secret briefing on U.S.-China war plans, the options that would be presented to President Trump in a time of war. The fake news delivers again, says Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary. The president himself, disgraceful that the discredited media can make up such lies. Indeed, Elon Musk was at the Pentagon earlier today, Julie Fine, but the White House maintains this was not about a secret plan, a secret war plan with China, that he was there acting as the leader of the Doge, talking about cost-cutting, streamlining with the top brass.
It was interesting because you obviously knew that question was coming after that New York Times report, and there was just fury. I found the president to be just downright angry about something that you knew was going to be a question, and that they just stuck to, he's there for Doge, he's there for Doge, he's there for Doge, when clearly there's a major report out there that you have to face.
Well, sure, but I mean, look, he's not a fan of the New York Times. We know that. He kind of hates the New York Times. These fake news posts started coming last night, though. This was immediately after the headline dropped and before they got in the Oval Office today, which it's raised a lot of questions about why there was such a fast and visceral reaction from the White House. But that's where we start with our political panel. Rick and Jeannie are back together today, our signature panel on the Friday edition. Jeannie Shanzano, our Democratic analyst, and, of course, political science professor at Iona University. Rick Davis, partner, Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist. What are your thoughts on this, Jeannie? Because the New York Times getting a lot of attention here. The White House won't have it. The fact of the matter is Elon Musk was at the Pentagon earlier.
He absolutely was. And what we understand is that, at least from the New York Times, and it was a well-sourced story, was that the meeting was planned and scheduled and then scrapped in the tank after that report came out. And as you two were just talking about, obviously the president very upset last night, continuing in today, not to mention the stunning reality of a president of the United States sitting in the Oval Office, calling one of the leading newspapers in the world an enemy of the people, and how damaging that is, when, of course, we know that the press is essential to a democracy. So there's that component. And then what I see as his sort of faux outrage. What did he think was going to happen when he put the wealthiest man in the world with billions of dollars of U.S. government and Chinese government contracts in charge of cutting the very government that he's receiving billions of dollars from? What did he think was going to happen? Conflict of interests abound, and he's going to have to answer for those. So his outrage is hard to understand when you look at it that way.
You know, Rick, his answer was outrage today. His answer was, I can't believe this is happening. I'm so shocked, which again, 12 hours after a report went out, clearly you knew that this was all coming in your direction. When this happened, by the way, Elon Musk did not necessarily have to go to the Pentagon right at that same time, but they chose to move forward with these plans.
Yeah, look, this is not an administration that's going to be set off on their program by media exposure. And look, it's probably a little bit of all this, right? The one thing we always used to know when I was in the White House is there was never actually a totally accurate report of what we did. It was always close, and it was close enough to have us react. And I think that's what this is. Look, I mean, obviously there was something going on that the New York Times picked up on about the subjects of what Elon Musk's meetings were going to be at the White House or at the Pentagon. But for all I know, Donald Trump didn't even know he was headed over there. This is an administration that's widely dispersed, right? And so it's always the option of the president, and in this case, particularly Donald Trump, to say, no, that never happened because I didn't agree to it. And that is the standard operating procedure for Donald Trump. If he doesn't say that it's happening the way it is, then it doesn't matter what anybody else within his administration said or does. And so, look, we've got a headline from the New York Times, reputable newspaper who is well sourced, as Jeannie says. But we also have the President of the United States who said either he's reacting to that or he really does feel like he's been put in an awkward spot. So, bottom line, there are a lot of questions about Elon's I would say conflicts of interest at the Pentagon, especially the optics of him competing directly with Lockheed Martin for space-based contracts. And then the day Lockheed gets beat by Boeing, he's standing in the Pentagon. So the optics of this are horrible, but at the end of the day, we're really not sure if there was any real exposure to advanced, war plans against China in the South China Sea.
No, that's right. Absolutely. It has more to do with perception, I think, today than reality with how little we know about the basis of that reporting. But the fact is, he's not just busy on Doge, SpaceX, and Tesla. Jeannie, Elon Musk is investing in politics again, donating this week to several Republican members of Congress who introduced articles of impeachment for judges. You know that this has been a very big issue for him recently. He calls them activists and is now getting directly involved in this upcoming Wisconsin Supreme Court election next month. We talked about this a little bit earlier. His America PAC, which helped to fund, of course, a good deal of the Trump campaign, is now offering $100. So much for the $1 million a week, Jeannie. It's $100 to registered Wisconsin voters who sign a petition against activist judges. This is, as it's written, who impose their own views. That's a quote. He obviously wants the conservative judge to be elected in this case. Will it make a difference?
We don't know yet. We will know soon. But, it's one of those stories where I think people, when they stop and think about it, how can this be legal? It is legal, apparently, under Wisconsin state law. And it's, should it be legal? Probably not. And so, not much the federal government can do about it. It's obviously nothing Wisconsin can do about it now. But the fact that you can pay people either the $1 million, as he was offering before, or $100 for signing a petition that is politically related is troubling in a democracy which depends on fair, transparent elections. So that is something, if there is a plea to the people of Wisconsin and the states and the federal government that can be made, let's get control of some of our election laws, because what's legal is in some cases like this even more troubling than what's not legal. And he has absolutely found inroads into something that is, at least as far as we know, legal today.
One issue Elon Musk may be affected by is tariffs, and the president in his news conference today again talking about April 2nd as Liberation Day. Rick, Republicans, there are some that are coming right out and saying they're concerned about it and it's affecting them with their voters.
Yeah, I think the voter backlash to tariffs is being picked up in a lot of the public surveys. There's been a number out just in the last week where we see the support for tariffs starting to digress. I mean, look, there's been a lot of negative press about the economic impact of tariffs. And we also know in those same polls that the lowest rating Donald Trump gets is on the economic stewardship of the country. So when you start combining these things, it looks like a prima facie case that tariffs are dragging down his numbers. You can load in price of eggs and all kinds of other things to that. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of Republicans are scratching their head going, how am I going to go home and campaign on the fact that Donald Trump's #1 economic priority is tariffs? And the explanation for that is, hey, bite the bullet, baby. We might be having a tough time, but like we'll get over it because we'll be headed into the golden era.
Well, it becomes a question then about how Democrats should be responding, Jeannie. We've been talking about this with the town hall meetings, with Republicans getting an earful, and even more recently, Democrats getting an earful, with a lot of upset Democratic voters following Chuck Schumer's strategy there when it came to the continuing resolution, whether or not to shut the government down. But in this case that I mentioned in Wisconsin, ahead of the Supreme Court election, Democrats from the state are up with an ad campaign. And it doesn't deal so much with any specific race. It deals with Elon Musk. Let's watch and listen.
Attacking Social Security, cutting Medicaid and child cancer research, dismantling the Department of Education. Elon Musk is out of control. And now the power-hungry billionaire is unloading millions to buy the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
The power-hungry billionaire, Jeannie, is this the foil for Democrats in the midterms?
Yeah, they're testing what they're going to see, if this works, if this gins up turnout, if they can take this seat, win this seat. But they're not sure. And one interesting thing is we have Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out on a tour, essentially, against oligarchs, as they describe them, like Elon Musk. And what they seem to be hearing a lot from the Democratic base is we want Chuck Schumer's head on a platter. So they seem less frustrated with Elon Musk in some cases and more with Chuck Schumer at this point for keeping the government open last week. So maybe that dies down a bit, but Democrats are still trying to figure their way out of this morass that they feel like they've found themselves in the last 8 weeks under the Trump administration.
Jeannie, you bring up a point here and you talk about the ad that we just referred to here. However, Democrats are going to have to find a message that puts them all on the same page. And what's going on with Chuck Schumer right now puts a real wrench in that. They can talk about Elon as the foil, but they're going to need more. They're going to need more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. They are going to need a message that sells. And this gets back to what Rick was just talking about and you were talking about, which is the economy, the cost of living, inflation, and tariffs. That's what Donald Trump won on. Democrats have to find their way there. I think Bernie Sanders and AOC are trying to do that by attacking the world's wealthiest man. But again, the base is very, very angry at their leadership. And some people are saying we could see a break in the Democratic Party. We don't know yet, but that there's a lot of frustration in the base right now.
Rick and Jeannie, our trusted Friday panel, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate you. So it's interesting, Joe, we're already getting to the point that we're talking about midterms and messages 1 month and a half into this.
That's the way that goes, of course. Yeah. That's why we'll pay a lot of attention to the Wisconsin race. That's the 1st of April. Stay with us. We've got a lot more ahead on Balance of Power right here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
9:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ 100 index, a Russell 2000 index of small cap shares, all trading in the red. But as of now, right now, the S&P on track for an up week. Right now, we have got the S&P trading lower by 12 points, 56.50 where we stand on this Friday, down 0.2%. Dow Industrials lower by 36 for the Dow, a drop right now of just about 0.1%, while NASDAQ lower by 4 for the NASDAQ Composite Index, just about flat on the day, down less than 0.1%. We've got the Russell 2000 Index of small cap shares down by 0.6%. 10-year, 4.24%, with the 2-year right now, 3.94%. Gold down $29 the ounce at $3,015. That is a drop of 1%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 68.38 a barrel. Bitcoin right now below 84,000 at 83,927. Bitcoin down by 0.7%. Elon Musk has held an all-hands meeting with employees as he seeks to reassure Tesla employees during what he called a little bit of stormy weather. After the car maker's shares plunged more than 50% in just 3 months, Tesla shares today part of a mega cap tech rebound. Tesla shares up now by 4.5%. Bottom line, though, down day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Right now, the S&P is down 0.2%. Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Julie Fine.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie Pellet watching Wall Street for us on the fastest show in politics every weekday from Washington. Thanks for joining on the Friday edition on Bloomberg TV and radio, also on YouTube, where you can find us now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. A lot of talk about Ukraine this week, certainly following President Trump's meetings with President Zelensky and with Vladimir Putin, both by phone, of course, but generated a lot of news and, of course, introduced a lot of questions as we consider the idea of peace in Ukraine, at one time hinging on a minerals deal, which seemed to have been replaced following the meetings with Putin and Zelensky by a truce centered around energy infrastructure and the possibility of American interest, investment in power plants in Ukraine, almost a business form of a security guarantee. Now it appears both are still on the table. The White House signaling that a minerals deal could be signed imminently. And yes, there could well be American interest in taking ownership of some of these power plants, including Zaporizhia. It's something that we talked about with the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, here on Balance of Power.
I think a deal could be done quickly. It's a brilliant idea when you think about it. We often use this misnomer term, natural resources. Those resources have been underground for millions of years and they haven't benefited anyone. I call them natural materials. They only become resources when technology, capital, and human activity brings them out of the ground and turns them into resources. But to have the United States as your partner to develop materials that have been sitting there for a long time unused, that's upside to Ukraine, it's upside to the United States, and of course it's a joining together of the nations in an effort on the ground in Ukraine. If I'm Ukraine, I am all in on that deal, and as the American Energy Secretary, I am all in on that deal.
You know, last night we spoke with retired General Wesley Clark, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Here's what he had to say about putting U.S. involvement in energy facilities in Ukraine.
Those are old, what we consider obsolescent nuclear plants. We didn't design those plants. They're not our plants. We can't just transplant people over there and say, hey, by the way, this is the GE design, go after it. It isn't. But yes, we could learn to take care of those plants. Zaporizhia, the plant's been partially occupied by the Russians. They've threatened to damage it and destroy it at various times. It wouldn't be such a bad thing if the United States says, well, now you can't touch it because we're in it.
Secretary, your response to that?
Yeah, of course there's complexities in everything when you do business offshore, overseas. Boy, I've done business in countries much more difficult to operate in than Ukraine. But, you know, of course, the general's right. It's a different plant design. But you would bring local experts that know that plant, and you'd bring high-end nuclear experts from the United States, and together, I think wise decisions would be made. If the political decision is made for the U.S. to lead the operation of that plant, so be it. We could do that, I think, with very little problem.
Secretary, have you spoken with any American companies that would be interested in buying a plant like Zaporizhia? And if this happened, whether it was that or another, would your department regulate it?
No dialogues about that yet. No dialogues about that yet. But America's full of expertise in this area. And boy, I, at the Department of Energy, have been overwhelmed with people putting their hand in the air and saying, put me in. How can I help? What can I do? So I think we would see tremendous interest. Something needed to be done. We'd have tons of people wanting to do it.
Well, the Energy Secretary was very quick to tell you, Joe, no deals on that yet.
Yeah, that's true. But the idea that they're open to it is kind of fascinating. That was a headline that seemed to resonate across the Capitol this morning, with the Energy Secretary making that clear first here on Bloomberg. And it's something that we'll be tracking. We could see a minerals deal come together over the weekend and be having a very different conversation about this come Monday. But of course, we'll let you know right here if it does.
It is interesting, though. He's very bullish on both. And you look at the relationship right now between the U.S. and Ukraine, which have a long way to go. But he certainly projected confidence that they can get something done.
That's right. Echoing the president, which he's supposed to do, right? That's one thing that we see in this administration.
Always. We really do see that with, you do see that with, you saw it today, earlier. You saw Pete Hegseth do the same thing.
Exactly.
I mean, you see he, at this point, early on in the presidency, he has his troops in line.
Sure. Well, as Julie mentions, we did hear from the president earlier today in the Oval Office. He spoke, of course, earlier this week when he went to sign an executive order to start dismantling the Department of Education.
And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it. And everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right. And I hope they're going to be voting for it, because ultimately it may come before them. But everybody knows it's right. And we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education.
And our guest is Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Thank you so much for being with us to discuss this subject today.
My honor.
I want to begin with the AFT suing the Trump administration after yesterday's announcement. Can you tell us when that came together, how quickly, and what you're hoping gets done in a short period of time?
The first case that we did this week actually had something to do with them collapsing and breaking the student loan system. And so we have basically said, you can't basically eradicate the student loan system. Still 45 million people are in it, and you got to reopen the websites and make sure that people can apply and make sure people can pay their debt down and things like that. The one I think you're talking about is that at the end of the day, and I hate bureaucracy the way most people do. I think that if you could make it more efficient and the president could make it more efficient, I'm with him in terms of doing that stuff. But evisceration of and abandonment of the role of education in the federal government is different than being efficient in terms of bureaucracy. So what we're looking at is that EO and making sure that kids, like in Massachusetts, which has the highest NAEP scores in the country, Massachusetts wants to keep the close to $300 million it gets from the federal government for Title I to do the programs that it does. Florida, who has the lowest NAEP scores and who was there with the president yesterday, we've said, don't actually take this money and put it into vouchers. Use this money in a way that really helps kids. So what we're about is making sure that the federal role, which is not curriculum, which is not graduation requirements, all these states, they're the ones who actually do education. The federal role is about ensuring opportunity for all kids. And that is what we're fighting for. And that's what we're going to sue to protect, protecting individual kids and their right to an adequate and frankly, an equitable and a real and a great education.
Randy, I know we're talking about a couple of different things here, and it's great to have you with us. I wonder if there's a role that Congress plays in this as well. You have a legal path And much of the check and balance we've seen against this administration over a course of issues, I could go through immigration, the DOGE cuts, and so forth. In this case, you're talking about student loans, but also the undoing of the Department of Education. Do you have the ear of Democrats on Capitol Hill who can make a difference? Or have you already picked your course, and that's the legal one?
No, look, and I laughed because I'm a lawyer and I'm a union activist, but I'm an AP Gov teacher. I'm a social studies teacher. So of course it's the Congress. They're the Article 1 branch of the Constitution. They're the ones who are supposed to be doing it.
You feel like breaking into Schoolhouse Rock with us right now, Randy?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, oh my God, maybe I have to give this course in Congress. But of course they're the ones that's supposed to be doing it. And even the president's EO suggested that. And, you know, this morning I was on a press conference with Catherine Clark, who is from Massachusetts, one of the leaders of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, and they're fighting it as well. This is the dilemma, and it really is a dilemma. And look, you said it in your last segment. The president's men are with the president's men, including all the people in Congress. And there's a point in time when you swear an oath to the Constitution, not to individual people who are president. And this really is in the Congress's arena, and they really should be dealing with this. But this is what I worry about. I just used the student debt example. You know, you can eviscerate a department by laying off its people, by shutting down a web service or online service. And so what I don't want is I don't want it so shut down in so many ways that kids are really hurt. And then somebody says, oops, we didn't mean to do that. Kids go through kindergarten once. We already saw during COVID the long-standing problems that happened when schools were shut down too long. We gotta make sure we get this right for kids.
Obviously, this is something that the president is very keen on doing. In this time of DOGE, when you look around and you think, are there some areas that you believe you obviously don't want to see the cuts, but could be cut, areas of bloat?
Yes, of course. I mean, anybody who knows me, you know, I used to rail against the New York City Department of Education all the time. I think that bloated bureaucracy is wrong. I think that there should be more money that is at the school level. I think there's too many different layers of questioning and things like that. But this is what's so special about this particular funding, like Title I, IDA, sorry to throw out names like this. We have fought for years to get this directly to schools for kids for certain reasons, so that it doesn't get subject to the bloat. And so that $100 billion, virtually all of it goes directly to schools. What I'm concerned about is what happens if it doesn't. Like I've given the example a lot of Truman High School gets like $2-3 million in Title I money from the federal government. They use it to lower class size. They use it for after-school programs. They use it for summer school programs. They use it for for a bunch of different things that are considered enrichment, as well as things that are considered remediation. What happens if all of a sudden the state of New York says, oh no, we're not giving it to you for that? And you call the Department of Education and there's nobody answering the phone to force them to do that. What happens if, Mayor Adams says, no, we don't want to use it for that. We need it for something else. So we need enough bureaucracy to actually make sure that the intended purposes are met.
Randy, it's great to have you with us. I appreciate your time. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, now actively suing the Trump administration over student loans, access to loans, which we talked about, Julie, yesterday. The Pell Grant student loans are going to stay inside the Department of Education instead of transferring them to Treasury, as many people thought might happen when the idea was to blow up the whole thing. Apparently, there will now still be some vestige of what is there.
There will be a little bit of something, because if they get rid of the whole thing, I think that creates way more problems with Congress, although I'm sure Congress will have plenty to say about this as it is.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the facts are the facts. They can't blow it up without Congress, so that's something that the White House has clearly started to adjust to. We'll meet you back here, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, for the late edition of Balance of Power. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew. Bloomberg Business Week is coming up on the way next, and we'll have much more for you coming up on the late edition. So join us here on Bloomberg TV, on Bloomberg Radio, and on YouTube, where you can search right now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. This
This is Bloomberg Business Week, insight from the reporters and editors that bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
And a very happy Friday afternoon, everyone. I want to say it looks like we made it, but I got to tell you, every week, Tim, just feels like 2 weeks or 3 weeks in one.
Yeah, it does. Don't speak too soon, Carol. We have 3 hours to go before we actually make it. So Yeah. Hey, but we are seeing a little bit of a rebound in the equity trade.
Yeah, it feels like stocks are trying to kind of crawl their way back. We are just off our best levels of the session. We've got a rebound in several of the mega caps helping to push stocks off of the session lows. But gotta say, market's still under pressure amid weaker than estimated outlooks from some bellwethers across a few industries. And that's what we are going to be focusing on in the next 60 minutes, those bellwethers. And Tim, we're going to get some great checks on the U.S. economy, the global economy.
Yeah, we're going to take a deep dive on two names that are stumbling in today's trade. One that is an economic bellwether, as you mentioned, Carol. The other, a read on global trade. Of course, we are talking FedEx and Nike.
Also weighing in on tariffs and technology and healthcare and the president of the United States and also Germany's economy and political health. Siemens Healthcare, Siemens Healthineers, I should say, their chief financial officer is going to be joining us a little bit later on this hour.
And Carnival shares are actually flat right now. They were down earlier in the session. We got a great read on the consumer. We're going to catch up with Josh Weinstein, the CEO of Carnival, in just a little bit.
All right, as Tim mentioned, though, we are definitely off our lows of this session. We are seeing stocks trying to make their way to the upside right now, back in the red. But let's get a check on the day's trade and some of your top movers. Here is Charlie Pellet.
All right, thank you very much. Happy Friday to you both. We are looking at a very choppy session right now. We've got the Dow swinging between gains and losses right to the numbers, with the S&P lower by 9 now, down by about 0.2%. Dow Industrials little changed, up 2 points right now. NASDAQ also little changed, up 4 right now, up less than 0.1%. Russell 2000 index of small cap shares down 0.5%. The 10-year 4.24%. The 2-year 3.94%. Spot gold down $30 the ounce at $3,014, down 1%. West Texas Intermediate crude holding on to a gain of 0.3%. 68.28 the barrel on WTI. Bitcoin, meanwhile, down 0.6%, 83,983 on Bitcoin. Well, you heard the announcement live at the White House here on Bloomberg Radio and Television. Boeing has won a contract to design and build the U.S.'s next-generation fighter jet, beating out rival Lockheed Martin for the multi-billion-dollar contract. The award caps more than 2 years of competition from between the defense giants' bids for the full-scale development phase of the next-generation air dominance manned fighter. Right now, we got Boeing up 5.7%, Lockheed Martin trading lower by 6.7%. Recapping here, we've got the S&P 500 index lower, down 9 points now, down 0.2%. However, this is key. On the week, we are looking at a gain right now of 0.2%. That will be the first up week after 5 weeks of losses. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg.